Thank you. I want to convene today's meeting of the Cincinnati School Board's Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee meeting, and a committee, I should say. My name is Eve Bolton, and I'm a board member, and we're going to go around the room as we always do. And we'll start over there with El Presidente.
Michelle Dunn, Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, Local 1420.
Trina Levis, Purchasing Director.
Nan Haygood, State and Federal Programs Manager.
Good morning, Cody Hutchins, Contract Analyst.
Chris Burkhardt, Chief Operating Officer.
Shauna Murphy, Superintendent.
Brandon Craig, Board Member.
Jim Crossett, board member.
Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting and Transparency.
Jennifer Wagner, soon to be retired treasurer.
Michael Guston, soon to be treasurer.
Lauren Roberts, Chief Audit Executive.
Recently married. And Rob?
Robert Wilson, technician. And if you'd like to speak during the hearing of the public, please click the hand icon. We will ask you your name and school association and invite you in at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. What we'll do, unless anybody has any other needs or whatever, we're going to actually go through the agenda as it is. Is there anything to move around on the agenda? Okay. If not, we'll do it in the order that it appears. Is that good? All right, let's get started.
So first up is Warlock.
So we have 2 months of reports since we didn't have a July meeting.
Thank you.
But we'll kind of go through them pretty quickly. So we'll start with the June reports, which are pretty, we've closed June, so these are pretty reflective of that. The annual comprehensive financial report, Plattenberg is working on that, putting that together. It's not due to be filed till the end of November. Just since it said annual financial, I thought I would kind of give you an
Please.
update on that. The auditors are starting doing some preliminary not investigations, probably better, sampling. Just getting their planning documentation together, and they'll probably be on site in a few weeks to do some specific cash transaction testing. So it'll be an ongoing process for the next 6 months or so. So on the slides, we'll go to slide 4, which is the cash and investment section. The pie chart shows general ledger all funds, 171 million at that point. And you'll see how that changes a little bit when we get to July. We had 35 million in STAR, 37 million in operating accounts, 19 million in debt. And you'll notice at the end of May, we did pay off the $20 million sinking fund. So that piece of the pie has gotten a little smaller as a result of that. The next slide is general operating account only. Again, we're just kind of using this as a tool to show how we're trying to maintain that cash account. The next slide is cash balances by fund. So we had 59 million in fund balance for the general fund. Again, the total there is 171 all funds. The 2 slides back is general fund. So this is what we were looking at as far as cash fund balance, just the general fund at the end of the year compared to the last 2 years, and where our encumbrances were at that point.
Comment?
And Kevin, how close to that, the forecast was that 59.6 million in cash?
It was really close, like 99% is what we've talked about. So there was some differences. The Medicaid reimbursement, and I'll talk about this later. The Medicaid reimbursements were delayed by the state. We did get those in August, which was over 3 million that we got. Again, it's a timing issue. Sometimes the difference between encumbrances and expenditures, it may be sitting already paid, or it may be sitting in encumbrance waiting to be paid. So, but I feel pretty good that it was really close to where we had projected.
Of course.
Next slide is 3 years of history for the general fund cash balance. Again, You can see the peaks and valleys. And then, does that have where we started? Oh, we ended at 59. Yeah, over on the right side. Well, I got my June and July is kind of coming together. The next slide is revenue. And you can see that the expected revenue was 628. We received 630. Again, some of that is timing, so it's not extra cash. It's just kind of a timing thing. But it was over 100% of what we had projected, so that was a good thing. Next slide just shows revenue by month. Again, we always talk about the peaks and valleys with tax advances, et cetera. Next slide is expenditures. We ended up really close, and Jen has made this comment, but in terms of actual expenditures plus encumbrances, which is the third column, 644. Our working budget, which included those carryover encumbrances, was 664. So for actual, about 97% of where we expected to be with encumbrance or with expenditures, and that does not include the encumbrances. So there's another layer to that. Next slide is expenditures by month. Just kind of, it gets compressed because of that peak in the repayment of the short-term borrowing that we did in FY24. Next slide is looking at actual expenditures, encumbrances, and the remaining budget. So again, as we, the actual expenditures were over 97% of the budget. So there wasn't a whole lot of extra room there, but wanted to highlight that. The next slide, I'll let Mike talk about.
Next slide is a summary of all the things that Kevin just talked about. As always, happy that our numbers match. One more slide, Rob. Thanks. Sorry. Two things you might see that look a little weird. There's a negative amount in other expenses. And what that is when we charge indirect costs to the federal grants, we take those charges out of the general fund, so that's good for us. And then the other thing that's new for this month are the advances out. So those are the advances we make from the general fund to other funds to make sure that every fund has a positive cash balance. And because our state and federal grants are on a reimbursement model, a lot of times they're negative because we're waiting on one more reimbursement check.
All right, and then
Turn
the
it
next
back to
section
Kevin.
is preschool expansion. Since preschool is not in session in June or July, I only included there are some cash transactions that occur in June as far as salary, as far as receipts from the county. So I included that in both sets of financials, but again, this kind of highlights the middle column of numbers that we are spending down the cash balances there, and we usually talk about that. So, and then the next section would be state and federal grants.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to try and go kind of quickly through June, since our fiscal year end really isn't until September. Our goals are cumulative, so July is really more reflective of kind of where we're at right now, since we have more of a 15-month fiscal year with the way the grants run. So in June, we did reach 77% overall spend. That's a little bit of a quieter month for AP spending because, we end the month early. Sorry. And so it didn't increase as much as we normally would see month to month because the payment month ends early. Next slide. So again, our goal was 68%. We're at 77%, so we're still well ahead of our target for our overall spending, both within non-public and public schools. Our key activities that month, as usual, we're trying to get all our applications in for 26 into the one funding application. That ended up not being the final place for our applications this year, so we're kind of redoing that right now, back into the CCIP. Next slide. This is just the slide that we always present, just as a reminder of what % of our funds go to the non-public schools. These are our final allocations for the year. So these are the final federal numbers for consolidated and support grants for fiscal year '25. And then lastly is our grant spending summary. Again, as you can see, our goal is 68%. There's only a few grants at the end of June that haven't reached that. Title I neglected, and Title II. Title I had a lot of spending in June because all of their summer activities, working with families, so we'll see a big uptick in that in July. But overall, we're on target. We've seen increases. Our primary goal has been the grants that either do not have carryover or don't have an extension, so that we make sure we don't lose any funds, such as non-competitive SSI and expanding opportunities. So we're really putting our efforts into those grants right now to make sure we don't give any money back.
Can I just add something that, the 8 million that goes to the non-public schools, it represents 12% of the total federal grants. That's pretty high.
And I think that begins to be very much more important, especially in a renewal year, even though this is not about that. People have to keep sight of much of this money goes elsewhere.
All right, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
I think that's
Question.
it for June, yeah.
We could, questions? Members? No questions about it? Other comments by administration or anyone else? Sir?
Thank you for these reports. They're great. Very easy to read and,
Pictures tell without.
yep, so thank you.
So we'll move on to July.
I guess so.
So let's go to slide 4. Give Robert a second to catch up. Also in the packet is the fund activity reports that gives all the activity by individual
Okay.
fund. I think that's really informative for the end of the year, if you look at the end of June. So we won't go over that, but you can see kind of a big picture of all of the funds and all the layers that occur during the year. Okay, so on this slide, you'll see our total now for all funds was 303 million at the end of July. And that's mainly because the county auditor got on a really good schedule of tax advances this year. And so they made 3 tax advances in July, where sometimes they wouldn't happen till mid-August, end of August. They're anticipating settlement to come in August, which, since we've gotten the advances, we'll just get a net amount, a small net amount once they do that.
Can you define what a tax advance is, so everybody knows?
So the tax advances, there is a due date when taxes are due. Traditionally, some residents and businesses will pay that ahead of time. And there is a provision that allows the treasurer to request, and the board always approves this process, to request that any money the county auditor has collected go ahead and be distributed to the district. And it helps us with, cash flow. It helps us with interest revenue, those kind of things. So, but I'm happy to report that they've been on a really good schedule this cycle. And so hopefully that will continue to go forward.
Excuse me, does that represent a change at the auditor's office, or?
I think it's just, they have some new folks in place in the last couple of years. And I think to be honest, there is a provision if a school requests an advance and they don't make it within so many days, they have to pay them interest. And they had that happen with one of the districts. And so I think that encouraged them to, okay, let's just get this out there and be as timely as we can.
Okay,
Everyone knows what the schedule is. And so
good auditor.
they're a good partner in terms of that. We appreciate their.
I know they really want to be. They've made an effort to be, for sure.
So the other thing then in July, so we had 131 million in Star Ohio. Point out, as I always do, this is kind of our high point. In between now and July, or down January 1st, we're gonna have debt payments, we're gonna have, all of our payroll cycles, and so it will be easy to chip into that. but it is anticipated in the budget, so. On the next slide, again, the general operating, we had about 69 million in that account at the end of July. Next slide is cash balances by fund.
Kevin, can I?
Sure.
Please.
So just with the general operating, like you should never see it go above about 70. Because of the process we put in place. So when we hit that upper limit, we transfer money to Star Ohio so we can earn interest.
So that's something that's being monitored or whatever.
So that's a change that we made to try to maximize our interest earnings.
Thank you.
Because currently we do get a better return in Star Ohio. So, okay, the next slide is fund balances. Again, most of that tax revenue is general fund related. We get a little bit for debt service, and so that is included there. Otherwise, pretty normal report there. The next slide is new for July. There is a requirement that if investments are made in commercial paper or banker's acceptance, which are specific types of investments, and we do that through Red Tree, our investment group. They manage all that within our investment policy. They decide, how to maximize that. But there is a small provision in the law that if we have any investments in that, there's a special report that has to be submitted to ODEW as well as the auditor of state. And so we have that information in your packet. It will be on the treasurer's report on Monday night. And then I'll do the submissions after that. It has to be done by the end of August. So that's a required piece. So along with that, we kind of wanted to update the investment or the interest earnings. And, we're happy to report that we had a really good year last year in terms of about 7 million in the general fund versus 4.7 the year before. Rates
good.
helped us a little bit, and then maximizing the timing of the investments has helped us there too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you could see a clear trend from the last 2 years. So last year is when we started doing our cash huddles and moving money back and forth to get it more interest earned. And so this year we had a full year of that activity. So you can see, while the rates had, like you said, helped a little, it's because we're investing better than prior years.
And managing it better,
Yeah.
being great.
And then also in the packet is just a summary level bank reconciliation. I think that's always good to put out there. It shows what the balance is in each of our accounts and investment groups, as well as outstanding checks and all that thing. The auditors are really interested in bank reconciliation, so something we'd like to report out on.
That's this handout that's in your folder.
Thank you.
And then the next slide is general fund cash balance and encumbrances. Again, as I mentioned, the timing of the advances was better. So, approximately $80 million more this July versus last July. Again, that'll kind of offset next month. And then the next slide is 3-year history of general fund cash balance. And as we talked about, a little bit of a decrease over the prior years.
I'm sorry, keep in mind that a 60-day cash balance would be about 110 million, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, because we're trying to build our reserves back.
So next slide is revenue. Our revenue projection, the far right column is 633. Again, we've received 28% because of the timing of those things. But you can see a little bit of breakdown there. Taxes is about 22 million more. State foundation, which hasn't fully resolved with the state budget, obviously that will, those elements will catch up as we go. But just to show, we are a little bit higher at this point, and we hope that will continue to be the trend. The next slide shows revenue by month. Again, I feel like presenting it in several different ways, but it's there if anybody has any questions for it. And then the next slide is expenditures. Again, our working budget 652, our current year appropriation 634.7, which is in that right column. And we're a little bit over where we have been in prior years. Salary, mainly breaking out salary and benefits here, about 3 million higher at this point.
So the trend that you're seeing on the 5.6% versus the 7.7%, that the 5.6% was the year that I would only allow people to encumber 90 days worth of expenses. So at this time of year, there wasn't a full year open encumbrance out there, where this year people were putting the full year's encumbrance in, because we were able to adopt the budget much, much earlier.
Jim?
Getting that full year of encumbrance, does that enable you to help manage cash flow better? Or not? Or is that helpful?
Well, it helps manage the budget better so that you're not overspending, and so with that, once a purchase order's put in place, that money gets set aside and reserved for that purchase order. Not necessarily cash, because that's on the invoice.
Right.
So it just depends on how those invoices flow.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think everything was just kind of frozen in that July month, in terms of, there wasn't any discretionary spending. It was mainly just things that had to be done at that point. So those will flatten out as we go on through the year, doing the comparisons. Next slide, expenditures by month. The biggest difference there is if we have a 3-pay month versus a 2-pay month. August is a 3-pay month. I believe it was a 3-pay month last year as well. So like, those are expected to be kind of strange little spaghetti lines across there. Next slide is just doing an early comparison of, what the unencumbered or uncommitted. And at this point, it's about 48 million, basically meaning, and there are things in there that will be paid that do not require encumbrances, for instance, tuition. Those kind of things come through the state foundation. We have to record them as an expenditure, but we don't have to do a purchase order process for those. But you can see the green is the primary, and that's the remaining budget for salary and benefits. So if nothing else, those expenses are pretty much obligated for the fiscal year. Next slide will be statement of cash flows.
All the things Kevin said, you can see, you got quite a nice chunk of property taxes from the tax advances. Purchase services are kind of high in July, but I think a lot of that is, year-round contracts, getting those in and getting those paid, ordering materials for the year, start the year off, so those are expected things. I will say we are at the high mark of our cash for the year, and then we'll chip away from here till
Apparently
January.
expenditure too.
Yeah.
All right, and then my other slide again, preschool expansion. We just have initial estimates for the budget in there. Again, payments to United Way, I think will be made maybe in August.
September.
Okay. I think last year we did them earlier. The year before, they always had a lot of carryover and so delayed. So I wasn't sure exactly the timing of that, but.
Jim?
The payments to United Way, with, my understanding is that has some relationship to enrollment?
No, it's based on their budget, and then when they finish the year and they have cash left over from the prior year, they're supposed to return it to us. But instead of returning it, I just don't make the first payment, or I make it smaller. But so we make quarterly payments, you adopt the payment schedule, usually in this first board meeting in September, and then the first payment is due by the end of September, I believe.
So is that payment number subject to a year-end surplus?
Yes,
Could reduce that?
yes.
Okay.
I think Hector estimated 2 million of unspent cash this year.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when I'm connecting. Hector and I are connecting sometime soon, but the goal is to get that, it has to be approved as a contract, so we'll try to get that contract in the treasurer's report for the 8th. So you can see it with the payment schedule.
Could you give if you wouldn't mind, a quick update on how the tuition assistance will be for the upcoming year?
So with the new master agreement, the first 2 years were identified monies that would go. This year is based on enrollment. So you get the $15 million of estimated revenue, you take off, there was a $2 million set aside for administrative costs for each organization, CPS and CPP. and then what's left over gets divided by the number of students, and then it gets allocated out on a per pupil basis. So it is, thank you for reminding me about that. That starts this year.
Jim?
So, thank you. So that $7.6 million number there is just an estimate then?
Yeah,
That's an estimate I included based on really prior practice, so that's why I kind of wanted her to explain that, so we could.
That makes sense, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike and I will work with Hector too.
And the way that works is that we budget the teacher, the preschool teacher in the classroom and their expenses for our tuition assistance. And it ends up being a journal entry where we recognize how much of their salary goes against towards the levy revenues. Does that make sense? Okay.
All right, and then back to Dan.
Before we,
questions, yeah.
before we do, any other questions about anything so far? I do want us to have a couple, 6 or 7 sentences about preschool, based upon where we are financially with preschool. Just sort of a elevator speech.
So there's a $15 million set aside annually that's from the $48 million levy that's coming up for renewal. And if you look at, I lost it, the budget. 18. So, thank you. So you can see the estimated budget combined organizations is 18.5 million, which is above the annual 15. There was unspent cash in the early years that we've kept aside. It's part of that $59 million in cash, but it's reserved for preschool. And as it continued to exceed the 15 million year after year, that cash is gonna get used up. So, it's very important to pass that levy, because we are their primary source of income. So if that levy doesn't pass, then they've lost their income.
And then if I could ask too, on that, for you to repeat as well, the fact that we're asking for this amount of money does not cover the actual cost moving forward. That when we passed it for 15 million, as you just pointed out, what it really is now.
Right.
And for us to make it up, we have to take away from K-12. And for them, they don't have a way of making this amount of money up.
Right, so 2 years ago, the budget, combined budget, I think was like 22 million, and so both organizations have been shaving back to start to live under the 15 million. We don't have a choice either. Well, you have a choice. You could use more K-12 money to support preschool. But I think we've gained some efficiencies in some of the growth work plan, and so that'll help too. And United Way or Cincinnati Preschool Promise is allocating their money out in a different way as well.
And I noticed last time when Shara presented to, and we were, as did I, to Cincinnati, she's very serious about removing from the vocabulary expansion. That we no longer are talking about expanding, at least they aren't, and probably we aren't, expanding seats. That we don't have the money to expand, we may not have the money to sustain.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think our preschool projection is higher for enrollment is higher than it's ever been. But we have other sources of income to support that. And I haven't seen the results, maybe superintendent has, of the ECE pilot that through the state foundation, the grant. So they were helping to pilot to fund preschool through the state. And I'm hoping that I'm predicting that it'll be successful and they want to expand it. So that'll help.
Who will check on that?
I believe your treasurer, next
Pilot.
treasurer will.
Okay, good.
I'll make a note.
Almost treasurer, will you do that?
I will make a note,
Thank you very
yes.
much. I'm keeping my little grocery list over here on my purple page. Because I'm not altogether sure if board staff is even with us today. I think we're both. This is online with us today. Okay. All right,
Oh,
good.
yeah, good to know.
All right,
You're recording this though, right? That is correct. Okay, good.
yep. Great, that's helpful. I appreciate it,
Okay.
especially that shout out for the savings in the growth plan too.
Okay, so we'll turn it back to the star of the grants world.
Uh-oh, there she is. The start, stage and screen right there.
That's a lot of pressure. All right, so just a reminder for grants, we're still continuing to talk about fiscal year '25. We really haven't got any numbers that are worth mentioning for 26. So we're still looking at closing out 25 at the end of June. So this is a
Wait a minute,
continuance.
wait a minute, a question. So you remember when they froze our funds? And then they told us they were gonna extend it from our FERs from September 30 to December 30?
Yes,
Is that still in play?
it is still in play. It is our goal not to go all the way until December because that will impact when we get our carryover.
Right,
But we do have some flexibility for the consolidated grant only,
great, thank you,
because the ones that were frozen were part of that.
thank you.
So we did see a little bit of a jump in July up to 81%. Probably, I would say most of that is from the summer school spending because most of that occurred in June and the salaries were paying out into July off of the timesheets and so on. So we are getting up there towards our target of fully spending out our grants at 81%. Our target was 74% for July. Next slide. Again, you can see that, even with, without carryover, we're really getting some high numbers of our spend out. The downside of that, of course, is we are spending into our carryover, as we should, to protect it, but that always means less carryover for the next year. So we're gonna have to learn to live with the current year allocation.
But
So,
as we build the next budget, you're saying that that revenue won't be there.
right, because we're used to having large amounts of unspent funds carrying over year to year, which really is not, proper grant management. So as we are spending it out properly, we're not gonna have double allocations in the future years.
And the expectation is that the money's being spent on the children that we have now.
Absolutely. It's
And
earned by the
that
students.
is the ethic we have to live by.
It's like accounting 101, the
You
matching
got it.
principle.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I mean, it's 100% supposed to be current year expenditures, and that's, we don't want sweeps. As Jen just alluded to, July was kind of a crazy month because 4 of our federal funds in the consolidated app and a few others got frozen on 6/30 of 25. They were not released back to us until 8/7. So we spent a lot of time contingency planning during July, trying to figure out how to get our year-round contracts in for curriculum items and things like that. And so it's a really stressful month, just trying to guess what was going to happen and if we were going to get those funds back and what would happen. We worked on getting, key contracts in. As Jen mentioned again, they did extend the spending period for fiscal year 25 funds until September, with normally the spending in 6/30 to allow us, to work within that window. So we were able to complete most really necessary activities. And then on 8/7, they did give us notification that the funds would be released as plans, and we got our new numbers. So,
So Nan, if you're not gonna, go ahead.
Is that what we did regarding the lawsuit? Are those the funds that we're talking
Yes,
about?
yeah, that was part of our, yeah.
Yes, as we said, we're
Our
not just
successful
educators
lawsuit.
now, we are litigants.
I think the day after we filed, they released the money. so,
That's the
hey,
way we like it.
They saw our name.
Us
they're
in
like,
Alaska, everybody take a cruise and go to Alaska because they are our new partners. That's our new cohort, or 4 districts in Alaska.
Our new best friends up north, right?
I have another reason to go to Alaska, that's great.
so
I,
it must
I
be-
also wanted to say, Nan, give your team a shout out. So one of the other thing, in between all the federal funds freezing and that whole craziness, State of Ohio also tried to roll out a new computer system for the grant applications and management. And the grants team did a great job working with the administration to get all the data in for that. And then about the same time they unfroze the funds, they came back and said, okay, we need to go back to using the old system. And it's 100% different. The questions are different, the grids are different, all that. So, yeah, everything is different. So the grants team is basically starting from scratch again to redo all that work to get it all back into the right system. And so I know they spent a lot of time doing unplanned busy work in a way to redoing work they've already done, which we all hate that, but appreciate your team for all their efforts on that. Because I know it's hard to go back and do something you just did, right? That's like the worst.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'll pass that on, appreciate that. All right, next slide. All right, so this is just where we're at the end of July with, again, fiscal year '25 spending. As before, you can see we're mostly at or above target on our consolidated and support grants. You can see with the non-competitive school improvement and EOEC, the ones that the state really likes to focus on, that we are at 95%. So we are going to ensure those get spent out since neither of those have carryover year to year. So we're going to be good on those. And then the next slide is a picture into fiscal year '26. So this is our final initial allocations as of 8/7 when the funds did get released. And so you can see that we did have a decrease of $3 million from our initial allocations of last year. Now, a lot of that came out of those supplemental groups because many of our schools, came out of the status and lost that funding, but we did have a significant drop in Title I. And so I would just like to note that our Title I allocation is basically at the same level as it was in 2020. And so not only is it, not increased, to match our enrollment, during that same time, in 2020, we had 14 non-participating schools that were not Title I eligible. We now have 5. So we've added, over 1,000 students to eligibility and participation in Title I with a 100% flat allocation from the federal government. So, we really are the definition of doing more with less because we're spreading the same pie over many more buildings and students. And so it is, a challenge to continue to offer the same level of services with a flat amount of money, when obviously salaries and benefits and everything else are going up at a pretty fast pace.
Thank you, Sarah. This is probably going to be said at some point, but our soon-to-be treasurer, Mike, has already started a work team, and I think, Board Member Craig, that was a direction and a suggestion you made. I think they've already at least met once to start thinking about our next budget ask and including what our priorities were going to be that we'll share with the board sooner this year as opposed to later.
I think it's a good example, though, and thank you. This is a really good example of we may not see a reduction in the total dollar in the same way, but we will see a reduction in how that dollar is spent, not because we have, overspent or anything to that effect, but because we have more schools who are qualifying, because more of our students are now officially in that boat of folks who would qualify for Title I funding, or at least schools were able to better allocate and better assess that they're sufficient need to qualify for Title I dollars. And that means, again, Title I dollars can only be spent as a supplement, not to supplant. Means that schools have to be better about how they allocate, but also how they then spend those dollars, because I know that's been the past years that we've really focused on as a committee, is getting them to spend their dollars fully, so we don't have committed dollars to a place where then they can't be committed to somewhere else where it's maybe a need. So maybe if you can just speak just really quickly on kind of the expectations for next year from that grant perspective of how you all will be kind of thinking about that as well, because I think that's the other part that's somewhat challenging, is that folks have kind of expected that this is be your dollar every year.
Yeah, we really can't just, put in the same contracts every year, expect to do the exact same things we do year by year. And it is hard sometimes for the principals to understand why they're getting less money when they know they have, the same number or more students and the same needs, more needs. And so we have, participated in some training. We presented information on Title I allocations and how it works at the principal's leadership to help them really understand better where the money comes from and how to hopefully really think about what are those measurable outcomes. And I mean, the state is focusing on that as well. They're asking for more and more documentation of really thoughtful, focused spending on the issues that you're facing. And we really have to expect, some bang for our buck, because we're just gonna have to spend smarter and more efficiently to really target what our most significant needs are.
On this particular chart, the column highlighted in green, that that 40, well, really, it's the 40 million, the next column over, which is the public share. Is that, now that this is sort of finalized and we received the funds, was this pretty much the number that was anticipated for the FY '26 budget?
Very close, wasn't it?
Yeah, so normally we budget at 95%, but in our minds, we think we're gonna get more because you expect it to trend up. So normally, we kind of have a little cushion of what we allow ourselves to budget and what we hope to actually get. So what happened is this year, we ended up with the 95%. Because you can see all the grants, went down small amounts, but, even $10,000 on a $275,000 grant is significant, especially when costs are rising, not going down. So almost every grant went down a little bit. And also, if you'll see, the non-public share went up. So now we're up around 15%.
Of course.
Because some of the grants, it's based on eligible students, and some of the grants, it's just based on enrollment. And so especially in Title IV, Title II, we're seeing a bigger chunk go to the private schools because it's based on their total enrollment, not just, demographic measurements. So that's another challenge that we have to, address.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
To that point, and I think this might be, helpful for, in some ways, to understand, like the Title I non-compete, or the non-comp, and then also the expanding outreach, like the drop in that number, as well as the Title I dollar drop, tends to affect us more directly. The areas that tend to be a benefit to the non-public portions, in some ways, did not feel the same pinch of that 95%. So even like when we say 95%, what we're really talking about is maybe like 85 us, 99% to the non-public share. That, I mean, is that pretty
Yeah,
fair?
and that's also accurate as far as carryover. They get their carryover first, so it also is impactful how carryover is allocated. So the less carryover that we have overall, even the smaller share that we get, so that's another challenge.
The other thing, and I think this is just, and again, not to this year, but I think for 27, is the potential changes in how they're deciding to allocate, whether it's the Title II and 4, supposed combining or whatever they're discussing around, and block grading. But we know that the block grading process, and at least for Ohio, will ultimately mean that districts, especially districts like ours, will get less out of that revenue because it just invariably is how our revenue from the state comes back on some of these grants. And so I think that may be the other thing too for us to be thinking about, in addition to recognizing we have more schools that are getting resources, is that if that total number for certain particular types of supplemental resources is either lessened or changed in how it gets mixed in for 27 fiscal year, we need to prepare 26 and how we budget and spend to ensure that by the time we get to 27, we're ready and that it's not as big of a hit on that particular cycle.
Okay. Any last questions about grants or anything else that before we totally move on? I think when we come back to talking about building a budget next year, some of that we can kind of build back into the discussion, because I think that'd be useful. Yes, sir, go for it. Tell us what you're telling us about.
Alrighty, so for our return on investment section, and I apologize, I have cough drop in, so. Next slide, Mr. Rob. Today we'll talk about the overall investment into instruction for FY '26. This did come as a request from the Google form for different topics that we wanted to talk about during Finance Committee. So our first slide here just talks about the overall K-12 direct investment. So this does not include things like APs, principals, operational supports. What I did here was used our AllaView, our budgeting software system, and pulled out everything with the functions there at the bottom, 1100s, 1200s, and 1300s. So those are functions that USAS uses to identify our instructional needs. So you have your regular instruction, 1200s is something like students with disabilities or a bilingual type of instruction, and then 1300s with career and tech. So you can kind of see the pie graph there, and like I said, those are just based on, those are projections, and this is general fund only. Next slide, Mr. Rowe.
I find this data fascinating,
It is.
broken up. And so it's, I was just gonna calculate, the 347 million is more than half of our budget.
And that's
great.
only like the direct instructions. That doesn't include any of like the instructional supports of like the social workers or any of that kind of.
Counselors,
Yeah, any of that
psychs,
work.
yeah, any of that stuff. So it would be interesting to build on this data as we go.
So if I can go back to that slide, Rob, go
Go.
back one. So to bring up again, we talked about this many times, but as we talked about Title III, which was a federal grant for our English language learners. If you look at our general fund bilingual instruction amount, it's $13.8 million. You know, and our Title III federal money is under $1 million. So just reiterate, I think we talked about this before, how much more money we spend out of our local resources on some of these things than what the federal government gives us.
Thank you, Michael. So instead of including them in the K-12 as their own little entity here, pre-K, wanted to do a breakdown of those of all
Oh,
funds.
good.
So this is not just general fund, this is all
missed that.
funds. Some of these numbers could change as grants come in, as you'll see, as Nan was just talking about, some of our funds they're working through those, so some of those numbers could change. And once again, the same logic here, using the functions 1280 and 3240, which are direct preschool functions as the Auditor of State uses the USAS manual to identify. And once again, this does not include any principals or any of that, or the supports that the direct instruction gets. This is direct instruction.
So I got-
Jim?
The funding from the levies, 15 million. And we get about half of that for CPS,
A little bit less than half,
a
but.
little bit
go ahead.
less. So is that money included in the general fund? Is that part of that 21 million in
Yeah.
general fund? So we're spending for pre-K quite a bit beyond what we get funded from the levy.
That's
Is that
correct. We
right?
started investing in general fund preschool long before we did the levy. So the $15 million split was to continue to expand beyond that.
Thank you.
And just one other point of clarity, preschool disability students are included in the state funding formula. So some of the general fund money actually is part of state formula as well.
Right. And they used to code preschool disabilities students with a preschool disabilities special ed code. But about 5 or 6, 8 years ago, maybe they changed it so that every preschool student has to have their normal special ed code. So it's hard to pull them out. But you're right. So the state funding formula only funds preschool disabilities and K-12, not regular ed preschool. So that's our responsibility.
So this does represent the total cost of preschool? I mean, is the transportation for special needs kids also in this?
So this is
I
just
mean,
direct
because we're gonna go to
instruction,
the
right?
public and say how much money we are going to spend.
This is not total spend on all preschool. This is just how it was coded as direct instruction.
Okay.
So transportation wouldn't be included. We don't transport preschool kids anyway.
I've got, don't preschool kids that are disability kids?
Disabilities, yes.
Okay.
There's about 290 of them, I think, ish.
So I think it would be very useful on a file card, we can go to the voters and say, this is what this is what preschool promise is, but this is the preschool budget. This is what preschool is costing us, rightfully so. That's what we're investing. It just is so confusing for people to see the division of the 48, the 15.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that, and then they think that's all we spend on preschool. I've had people tell me, well, you only spend $7 million on preschool. Oh, really? So I
Right.
think if, just a flashcard or something, I think that would be helpful. Brandon?
I just want to say to thank Cody, because I think one of the things that we will have to spend more time on talking about as we're building this budget is not looking at things in the normal traditional way we
Right.
typically were. And the direct instruction part is very helpful for us to also understand, because there's a dollar that comes with both the direct instructional staff that are serving in that purpose, as well as the other things that may have different directives or different levels that we can do, that we have more flexibility some ways on. And so I think one of the things that I
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's the part of the narrative, I think, maybe to clarify in some ways. Preschool is the one about, we spend a bunch of different ways to spend money to pay for preschool. For the rest of the district, it's about, we're working really hard to make sure every kid gets to every school day, gets through every school day, gets home safe. And that, because we know that when they do that in our district, they graduate. Right, and it's a really cool narrative to be able to say that when we spend that money on instruction, that's producing results. And so I like that kind of idea also, because I appreciate kind of that focus, and that's a large part of what we sometimes hear people talk about. Is like, you're not spending money on teachers, and that's the narrative that we sometimes hear from folks, is that you're spending money on everything else but people in the classroom. And this is telling us a little bit more of that information to be able to counter some of those assumptions.
Jim, go ahead.
I think that information's helpful, but it's got to be, in my opinion, to help with the public, it's got to have some context over a couple of years, because I think we can demonstrate, how much we're not spending money that doesn't get to the classroom. We're getting more efficient. So I think not only is this how much we're spending, but this is how more efficient the district is getting, I think is going to be important to give that some context.
We were just sneaking notes back and forth. He's going to do a series on Money Matters with Mike on this kind of stuff, which will be help educating the public.
Does that make sense, Mike? Yeah, okay, thank you.
I would also add that there's always been this effort, and this dates back to Mrs. Ronan, where we're making the case that how much money we spend on central office versus the schools. Well, now, that's not good enough as a breakout or a
Right.
breakdown.
Right.
What you really want to see is how much money are we spending? And I think this goes back to something that Kareem has mentioned a couple of years ago even, about emphasizing the per school, per student kind of
Right.
expense, which you're getting into as well. But I really like that direct instruction, because again, when people came and they were worried we were cutting social workers, my God, we have more social workers per capita than probably any district in the state of Ohio.
Right.
So, but we have to be able to prove that, and not just like 1 year.
Right.
And I think with that kind of breakdown too, you're going to see the benefit again of even the growth plan, that, or whatever savings there are regarding per student, per school, what.
Right.
So yeah, the better the breakdown, because people were always a little suspicious of the breakdown of central office versus, because they didn't understand how much for the schools was happening here. And the better that we can clear that up, the more likely we are, maybe not, it's going to impact this November, but next November when we're asking for huge amounts of money, in whatever format that's going to be.
Right, so I envisioned, and I wish I'd thought of this, I actually thought about it a couple years ago, I was just never able to get to it, but like an infographic of a student, and then the different levels of different kinds of spend for that student. And then we've been talking for a while about expanding the website to have these kinds of details.
Sure.
Instead of just the financial reports and the 5-year forecast, have it be more pretty.
It's a narrative. We don't need, the public is happy with all the specifics, but the
Right.
public needs a narrative. And I think that even if it's a visual narrative, that would be
Right.
fine. Any other comments? We'll keep moving.
All righty. Next slide, Mr. Rob. Thank you all for the feedback for that, taking notes on all that. All right, so here what I did was using the investment budget the projected investment budget that we just talked about, and coupled with the projected enrollment, dividing each one of those sections out by the enrollment that was categorized for those students. So breaking it out all the way from elementary gen ed all the way to students with disabilities 7 through 12, using those functions, those codes to identify those. And then the way you see it there, the first number listed is the projected enrollment for that area. And the second number you see there, the dollar sign, is the per pupil estimated, or projected, I'm sorry. All right, next slide, Mr. Rock. And then something cool that we talked about, Jen and I talked about, and Mike, in looking at this, was breaking this out by the enrollment of classification. So when I talk about students with disabilities and the projected enrollment, it doesn't just include self-contained units. It also, what I did was worked with DSS to go next step further and do the inclusion classrooms as well, so we could break it all out and get a very good idea of where everything's at with our enrollment. And that kind of just gives projected enrollment, the percentages where we were, and then just kind of representing that nicely. All right, next slide, Mr. Rob. And then here, the next two slides are instructional budgets per either school or department. So the first slide here is by department, using those same codes that we talked about. So if a department was using in their Allaview system function code 1100 or 1200, 1300, those functions we talked about earlier, and seeing how much they had set aside for those, and then dividing it by the overall enrollment. So just assuming that the budget for each department would be spread across all overall enrollment and getting that. So.
When you did the budget, tell me the separation here, the charts, we got instruction.
So the first one here is by department, so direct instruction. So if any, say curriculum, for example, used any of the 1100 functions to associate saving a budget towards elementary or middle school, broke those out, whereas you can see Department of Student Services, they use the functions like 1200 for direct instruction. So it's the same graph as what we talked about earlier, just only by department.
What, are there any departments missing, like the deputy or somebody else here?
This was all that I
Instruction.
found out of the Allaview system. So as the year starts, if we transfer funds around to different functions, this could change, but this is how the projected budget was set up.
So you wouldn't expect to see anything from the treasurer's office in direct instruction.
Right, but I would for
It's-
deputy superintendent.
It's probably like in curriculum.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And
Deputy-
student services or something, or satellite okay.
Department of Student Services in there, you see they're the biggest spend. What's interesting is the second biggest spend per pupil is tuition. So it's money that we pay for children to attend and placed things where we can't serve them.
And sometimes, is it also in sometimes court order?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Order of
absolutely,
business,
yes. So is that making sense to you?
Sure, sure, I just-
Whoever builds a budget is how they code their spend is what drives
Gotcha.
this information.
Got that. I just know that deputy's very much responsible for instruction, so it shows
But-
up in curriculum and the people that.
Yes,
report
because
to
her
sub
budget is just
departments.
her secretary, maybe travel mileage and
Gotcha,
office supplies,
gotcha.
so.
Yeah, I
It's-
should have specified that. It's based on the budget unit. So curriculum 0 to 5, if I
Cool.
saw it under curriculum, that's.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
It's good nuance, though, that's important to
great
see,
question.
okay.
Jim?
Just to help my understanding, so this is money that really gets spent, that really has a direct interface with students.
Correct.
But it's not necessarily school-specific.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So it's in addition to what the schools do, yes.
Just a quick one.
Brandon?
I think it's worth noting too, again, that the things that we have paid attention to over the last couple of years, again, Department of Student Services is one where we have moved around how some of that is also calculated, because I think in past years there were they replaced it in different areas, and now it's been moved back in student services. So that's one thing that in some ways, if you look at the historic numbers, won't necessarily reflect
Right.
the same way.
Right.
And that may get us to a point where we have to think about some like conventions on how things are budgeted. Because I think that would be helpful so that we can start having consistent numbers over the years.
Right, and that's why we quit, when we present the public version of the budget, that's why we quit doing it by budget unit. Because of all the reorganizations that we've had, makes it, so we started grouping it into sections that typically stay together, but have moved apart, because it does make the history look weird.
I think the other one that, you know, again, is worth us, at some point, sometime later in the world, as we do our budget, to think about is where something like, for instance, career tech, what part of it is career tech's budget versus what part of it might fall under curriculum, or what part of it might fall under student services. Those types of things that maybe that also would be a little less understood by the general public as they're looking at when we box these things out. Because there might be an aspect of something that we purchase for curriculum purposes that go directly towards a career tech program that will lie in a certain budget line, but it doesn't look like that based on how people might think about it, right? Because they don't think about budget names or budget categories in the same way we might think about them, so.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so the next slide, Mr. Rob. So same idea here, except for this was broken out into the schools, so these were funds that were directly budgeted to school budget units, and funds that were, and then the projected enrollment there as well. So the idea here was to, I'm sorry.
This is not a complete list of our schools.
You have-
No, I
you have a
only did the
handout.
top 10 here
The
just
top-
because.
thank you.
Yes, thank you for
That's
clarifying.
what, that's what the public is.
There's a
Oh,
handout.
yeah,
in
oh,
your
yeah,
folder.
I've seen that sheet. I'm just saying, the public has to anticipate that.
Good call, thank you, ma'am. Yes, so same idea here, taking the investment or the investment budget for instruction and dividing it by the projected enrollment, giving how much you can see per pupil estimated there.
Jim, you have a comment?
I got a couple of questions about this. The top two schools, seems to me the Riverview East number just doesn't seems like there should be something related to Spencer there because it's a shared building. It just doesn't feel like, maybe that's the perfectly calculated number, but maybe there can be a footnote about that or something. And also on the Bramble School, I think that deserves a footnote too, possibly.
Startup, yeah.
It's a startup, but
Yeah.
also we have savings because we don't have to spend money to train teachers as much, correct? Of saving somewhere else,
Eventually, yeah.
somewhere else in the
That-
budget.
That's where we're going, and we're very, very, very close. There's an entire team working on that, including several of our Montessori principals.
But I think
But
it's,
that wouldn't have been, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that PD training wouldn't have been included in the school budget, that was in HR's budget.
I understand, but I think it could be a footnote to say, here, put an asterisk by Bramble, say, look, it's not all, that's the cost, but, there's some savings somewhere else because it's a lab school. I just think some of those things that would be helpful. I mean, because those are pretty expensive schools, they're outliers, but there's exceptions to why they're
Correct.
that way.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And this Riverview East is only the Riverview East students. It is
Right.
not, would not be Spencer, because that would be a completely different school. But yeah, the footnotes, since how we're presenting to the public, any data, it's helpful for them to have the frame of reference.
Just a suggestion.
No,
It's a
no,
great
no.
one, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
It's a good reminder.
And Riverview East actually was one of our most expensive schools to maintain. And glad that it's almost done.
I do want to comment on the least expensive John Gilligan and virtual, which is where a lot of work was done this past year. And then I love seeing Pleasant Hill, South Avondale, Ethel Taylor, College Hill, all of that a part of some phase 2 work. Yay.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Superintendent.
Transition. Brandon?
I do want to, and I think it's worth noting certain things that are factors for this year that may not be factors for next year, or other things that are part of transitioning. I also want to note that there are some schools that, even as we are thinking about the schools that we are seeing benefits of some of the work we're doing, there are other schools that we still have to figure out solutions for, because at the end of the day, like Evanston is number 3 on the list or number 4 on the list. And I think it's a long-term issue that we will have to think about, or Woodford is again another example of that, where we may be having to have a bigger conversation about the feasibility of the school, and not again to put people on alarm, but the reality is that we do have changing neighborhoods that are not getting fixed anytime soon by the way the city is designing their plan of habitating our communities, right? So like if we are not investing in communities to build families into certain parts, the long-term success and the long-term amount of information we're having to put in to make a building successful, it's just the additional cost that we pay, and not the cost of others throughout the city or others who are our partners. I think the only other thing I would also add too is it would be interesting to see for our high schools versus our elementary and junior and middle schools, if those numbers for our high schools tend to reflect the additional programming that we're doing more so than the additional students. Because Woodward, for instance, is a higher number, but there also is a lot of programming specific for Woodward that might be what drives that number up.
So I'm kind of envisioning like a little preface to the report to say, this group of programs, some context that goes with the report. So we can work on that.
I love this conversation because there's a lot of caveat to that, like, the number of specialized units at Woodward and other schools.
Correct.
Just really something to dig into the why.
The why,
There-
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. This is great. I'm loving that the conversations that we're having. It's like a change
Absolutely.
in culture.
Well, and
And I-
I'll be a little bit more direct even about one part of it, is that we can no longer subsidize schools that are too small
Yeah.
or too unsuccessful, whatever that means. And we haven't defined it. We certainly don't depend upon the state to define it for us. We can't we can't. We can no longer subsidize those schools. Every school is going to have to be able to not only perform and serve our children, but also be cost-effective doing it. And it starts with making sure it's fully enrolled.
So-
Because we know if it's not fully enrolled, it's too expensive.
I would like to just
Jen?
piggyback on what you said, that you look at the bottom of the report and we're spending $9,600 of general fund money per pupil. This year's state share is at 31%, which means we're only getting $2,500 per pupil
Absolutely.
of base cost. So there is, this doesn't include categorical
Sure.
funding, but the percent is shrinking dramatically from the state.
And I'm going to continue to be direct and whatever, but also we can't keep having all the public money, much of the public money, go to unpublic, non-public schools. And that doesn't mean anybody's against a parochial system. It means that we can't have 3 school systems and pay for them. We can't.
What's interesting is on the first day of school, I was assigned to the Ed Center, so I was chatting up people that were
Yeah,
enrolling. And I ran into a mom on her way out that she had just withdrawn her kids and put them in charter schools, but she didn't understand that they weren't part of CPS.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that's, I don't know, maybe an opportunity for different kind of communication or something.
Mr. Crossett mentioned that to me just the other day. I mean, that's part of our messaging. Our messaging, we are in a competitive market, unfairly competitive, not a level playing field at all. And it's time to muscle up, because we've got to get that messaging out there, because I'm telling you, if those kids are in those charter schools, they're not learning as much as they would be at CPS. It's as simple as that.
Yep.
Sir?
I got a question that, whatever, you said $2,500 or less than $3,000 per student. Is that number, are you calculating that number by also reducing, by taking out the dollars that like pay for transportation in non-public schools? So or is it really truly less than that because we've got to divert some of our money?
So I took it from the state foundation report. The base cost is 8101 for us, and our state share is 31.88%. That's how I calculated it.
So it's actually less than that when you take, there's money that comes from the state that does not go to our students. So it's actually less than that? Am I saying that right? Like for transportation, right, for example?
Well, we do get reimbursement on transportation on another line. that's not part of the base cost.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, really.
Oh, it's like,
Nothing's ever
we
full.
spend what, $40 million in transportation, and we get 12.
12, yeah.
And I'll never say
It's
this,
never
for-
100% reimbursed.
I'll seldom say this, but in fairness to even the current federal administration and state administration, IDEA has never been fully funded. So, I mean, we've never been dealing with the amount of money we should have been getting for special needs kids or whatever, ever. And now it's even less. Brandon,
The disabilities education.
disabilities,
Yeah.
But I do think that goes a little bit more to the point of
disabilities.
the allocation of funds that we get from the state is the idea of what you would educate a student without any additional needs.
Correct.
And what we have in our district is a number of students who in some form or fashion
Well-
have some form of an additional need.
The state funding formula does do a base cost, in which we're
Yes.
talking about, but they do add what they call categoricals. So they do an extra weighting for students with disabilities, gifted, ELL,
But like
career tech.
the needs for like a child who has some psychological needs, who needs the counselor to work with them, the child who has safety needs, so they
Right.
need to ensure that they have a safe place to be picked up. I
Right.
mean, the things that we are dealing with on a regular basis that are not even just the disability related issue for a child or
Right.
the child who's a multilingual learner, the other stuff that our children go through when there's a serious incident that happens and we have to deploy a bunch of resources into a building to ensure that those students have the needs to
Yes.
ensure they learn. The state doesn't fund that either. So like, those are things as well that when we think about our budget and we're thinking about how much we're spending on per school, per pupil, there are a bunch of categorical costs that we spend as a means of getting our students through the day, right? Like just to
right.
keep them on track.
And in
Don't
their
have to
minds,
cover it.
it's all part of that base cost. But clearly, it's not enough. And, they spent 2-3 years working on an update to the categorical spend and realized it was gonna cost $1 billion. So they just set it aside. So the student weightings for those categoricals are 6 years old. And so they're just not keeping pace with inflation that we have to pay.
There is no intent whatsoever from the state to fully fund education, public education. And we just have to cope with it as best we can. We good?
Yep.
All right, the next section, Rob. All right, so our next section here, starting to talk about multi-contracted vendors. So these are FY '26 contracts. And what I did here was broke them out by vendor with the total number of contracts that they have currently in the system, and the total dollar amount that those contracts are worth. That dollar amount is not amount paid, but what the contract was entered for. I just want to specify that since we're early on in the year.
Right.
So those top 10 vendors there, you can kind of see, and then there's a full list, a link attached there in the slideshow, but for the board members and superintendent, I did give a printout, and I also have extra printouts if anyone wants to see that here. But that just kind of breaks down what those are, gives the purpose of what those contracts are, and the amount.
Well, and it starts the conversation and the ability to possibly consolidate some of those and negotiate better terms, the possibility.
Well,
'Cause-
and they shouldn't be so individualized, should they? I mean, shouldn't this would require RFPs in some of these or what?
It's something to consider, yes. Some of them might, but you don't, just because the same vendors use doesn't mean the same service is being spent. And so it's a reason to start the conversation.
Yes.
Ms. Levens?
Yes, I would like to comment on that because I'm looking at some of these top 10. And they do have cooperatives next to them, and we do have actually RFPs. So some of these vendors do have RFPs and cooperatives.
Okay, and
Embedded.
and explain what a cooperative is
A
for us.
cooperative is where we can piggyback off of another entity or someone else has already did the RFP, and we're able to piggyback off of it as requested by the Ohio Vice Code. We're able to do that. So we do have a lot of these vendors that have cooperatives with them, or a RFP or bidding has been done. And so in the cooperative, a bidding has been done. And so
Okay.
then we allow our actual district to use that cooperative throughout a lot of these multiple requisitions that actually enter into Business Plus. So we do look at that, and we do have, looking at this list, I'm looking at like an American Sound, we have a cooperative for American Sound. CBTS, I think we have a cooperative for them as well.
Right, we're not trying to say that that's not happening, we're just saying that when we see a lot of multiple contracts, vendors would have multiple contracts, it's an opportunity to look to see if there's an opportunity to, or do it in a different way.
Absolutely.
That's all we're trying to say
I
here.
totally agree. And that's something that my team is also looking into as well, to make sure
Good.
that our contract administrator, Yolanda Johnson, and she actually looks at that, she looks over those contracts, and she does look to see whether or not, these could be combined. No, put that on the same contract line so we can see all the costs. So it won't be going like for the same one particular department or school, if you're using that same vendor multiple times, put an amendment in so we can see that cost and we can make an identification. So yes, I totally agree. That actual identification is really needed and good.
So-
Jim?
So thank you. Is a cooperative mean, you've done an RFP and you've got, say, 3 vendors? Does that mean you can choose to use any one of those 3 vendors? Is that what that means?
So in some cases, a cooperative they do award more than one vendor under one cooperative, yes. And just like when the RFP bidding process, when you look at an RFP bidding process and you say, for instance, the facilities world, there's so much going on, we have so many big properties, we may actually award more than one vendor. So yes, in the cooperative world, that's also allowed.
So a lot of times ODE or the state will do their own bidding process, but they'll allow school districts to take advantage of the collaborative spend because you get a better price. So you don't have to go and do your own RFP.
Is it, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim. Then I'm pulling this number out from some long list ago. We have like 1,600 different vendor contracts.
No.
A little high, but
Yeah, I would say it's more like 1,200.
probably,
Maybe
you're
like
you're in the
1,000.
ballpark.
I'm
a
gonna
lot.
I'm gonna stick by my 1,600.
Okay.
Well,
If they're
and-
non-public in there, we might be close to 16.
I mean,
Yeah.
And then some of them
In
are
the
payments
ballpark.
that come through. If
Yeah.
you're looking at the actual.
But that just seems extraordinary to me, even though this is a huge organization, and I'm not saying that is too many, but I just think that that's a hard thing to manage.
It is. So when you say contracts, we also look at MOUs, agreements, and everything like that. So
Well, I think this was actually, I
Yeah.
think this was a vendor list I saw.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
a- It's a vendor list, and I bet you that I somehow, and again, I'm 74, I'm not gonna trust that number totally, but I feel pretty good about that number.
so you're in the ballpark.
That's a lot. Okay,
there
good,
is.
good. I like to be in the ballpark.
And you're right, I mean, but we gained efficiencies when we're able to consolidate. So not only
Yes,
gain efficiencies
exactly.
on purchasing power, but on the back end, it's less contracts that purchasing has to handle. It's less things that we have to budget.
Right.
About a process improve and get updated or approved by the board. So this is just starting the conversation to look for opportunities, that's all.
Exactly.
Cody?
Brendan?
Just
Oh,
really
sorry.
quick, and yeah, apologize for stepping out for a second, but I think one of the things we talked about it also in part of the contract deals that we're doing, and sometimes why we have multiple contracts or whatever, is because we have certain things that are like really specific needs. So I remember back when we did, we talked about like some of the contracts we did for some of the groundskeeping services and some of the other things that we were using tools for, something where a particular vendor could not provide, or no one vendor could provide.
Like the
all the
mow, it
things
was
we
like the
were-
mowing services and land, and the snow removal and that stuff,
Yeah,
yeah.
and like those type of things. And I think it is helpful in some ways also to recognize those contracts where, for instance, is the best way to bid that out, to bid out one large contract and then have 4 or 5 different folks in there involved, or is the best way to maybe bid out a region or bid out
Right.
a smaller portion? Because we experienced this when I worked in the district with, in the past, is that the way the construction bids always were done is you did like one bid for all the plumbing on like
Right.
5 projects.
Right,
And it meant you had one vendor who could charge you whatever they wanted to.
Well,
And like that presented problems, 'cause they
And
would
take the
basically,
lawnmower with them.
right,
is they would basically, bring in the subs for all the people who would have normally bid you at a lower cost.
right.
But unfortunately, it couldn't do the size of the project.
It also has a negative impact on the supplier diversity efforts. So
Yes.
you're starting to shut out the smaller women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses that can't handle the largeness of the contract. So when you break it down into smaller contracts, you give them more opportunities.
And long ago, Jen, that was part of the reasoning.
Yes,
We all, and rightfully so.
yeah,
So I think it's sometimes it's about right sizing the contract itself of what we're bidding out, right? So you may not need 10 vendors to provide, paper in a school. So maybe you need one or two, but maybe what you would do is buy a corridor. To have your vendor who does the east, the vendor who does the west, the vendor who does the central. And now we're out of having 12 contracts doing paper, but we're not down to one person who says, I can charge you whatever I want to.
exactly.
Thank you all. And I'm gonna piggyback off what Trina said too as well. Just for example, Hamilton County, you see the number of contracts there is 11. 5 of those might be a data coach that all have the same RFP, so technically you could look at that as one with the one RFP. And what I did was, because I've had this conversation with Yolanda and Trina, is on the tab or on the link there or the printout sheet, you'll see a column that should say RFP number or renewal or something on there. I wanted to make sure to include that just so that we knew. If we look through it, Hamilton County might have 11 contracts, but 5 of them are for data coaches and have the same RFP, just to show that we did our due diligence there.
And every
Thank
school
you.
does their own contract.
Well, that's another issue.
So, but thank you. Trina, for bringing
I think that is a problem. But we'll keep working on it.
Next slide, Mr. Rob. So I believe this starts the conversation on item number 2, if I'm correct. This, talking about the key performance monthly updates with the Hamilton County and then the ESC non-competitive.
Yes, and this was at a board request, it was a board request to provide this information.
So
Yes.
the slide you'll see here is Hamilton County Education Service Center for the past 2 years of 24 and 25. I will note that these numbers could be updated all the way through the end of FERs, as some of these contracts are paid through grants, and grants have until September 30th to fully pay out. So I can update these numbers again, but if there is a contract that's paid through a grant, there's potential that it's still paying out. But I did want to just note here the different services that are provided, and for board members and superintendent, I did get a printout that breaks those two down, FY24, FY25, and then a summary. I have those available if anybody else here would like to see
This is this,
those.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
This has been a continuing issue even in public session, as we've been going through the last couple of years of budget. This issue has been raised, and I know the last finance meeting too, the issue of the data coaches was raised as well. So appreciate the extra work on that. And
what
there'll be
mo-
board members that'll be very interested in this.
One of the first things that gets thrown out during the budget cut conversations is cut the data coaches, but they're not general fund, they're grant funded. That, and the competitive grant that Nan was talking about, we have less schools that are participating, so they're just not gonna have the funds to do that anymore. But it's important to understand the source of the spend when you're making those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, like there's like the second line there, non-public contracts, which we're the fiscal agent, but we don't tell
We
them
don't-
what to do or how to do. We
Right.
just-
Right.
We just move the money, so it's not a decision on our part.
That would be a savings. if they could
Again,
direct
there are
fund
things that we can no longer
Yeah.
support, subsidize, or pay for. And you're gonna really see it in 27. Brandon keeps reminding us, he was reminding us of 27, I believe in 24.
Be prepared.
That's right. And the board's gonna have to do this.
them. They're running out of time.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, I
this is
think,
where-
yeah, thank you. I think Cody's information has teed up the next two pieces of conversation, so thank you, Cody, for the data. Kind of sets the context. One of the things I wanted to bring to this committee is, it's a thing called Educational Service Center Non-Competitive Proposals. And we've had HCESC asked us to sign this. There is an application the treasurer can submit. And basically what it allows you to do is contract with an educational service center without going through the traditional competitive proposals. And so there's a couple things they have to do. They have to have their services and costs posted on their website clearly. They have to be designated as a high-performing educational service center by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. And they have to have a clean audit. The last audit has to be clean. So, and in most, and definitely HCESC, but most educational service centers will qualify for these things. And for the most part, I think the concept behind it is that these educational service centers exist in each county to support the county schools. We are kind of an outlier, especially in Hamilton County, because of our size. But if you talk to our peers, they use educational service center for a lot of things. For PD, I mean, a lot of them use them for their daily subs, like they contract their subs through there because they don't have the resources to manage it.
I would be interested in knowing how the other 7 urban 8s use their service centers.
It'll be a mix depending.
I would be interested in seeing that, because these were created for mostly the other 630 school districts. That's too many. But this is, I think, an unusual situation here, but maybe not among the urban 8s.
No, I think a lot of the things that we do here, EMIS reporting, we have a great EMIS reporting department under Kathy Spellman. A lot of ESCs do a lot of IT work. We have a great IT department under Jeremy Gallahue and his team. So we don't do those services. And
Yeah, so some of those places provide their network services to smaller districts who can't have a technology department.
And when the OSBA convenes, the reality is 1/3 of the people sitting in that room are from the service centers. So the state loves these, and that's the way it is. Brandon?
Just kind of piggybacking onto that thought, though, is there may be services, for instance, we would need that would be helpful that comes through one of these ESCs. I'm also just wondering if they are even doing those services at the present moment at all, because, like for instance, some school districts may use their county or their local ESE because they have been doing and providing the service on a regular basis. If ours is not, and that's where they're going to try and get into in order to provide services for us, it also seems like we're just asking someone who's not got the qualifications to do work in hopes that they'll get it done better than we are doing it. And it's a little bit of a worrisome thing for me, because I know we're having the conversation around data coaches, we're having the conversation around some of the other things that we are using them for, that we're at best seeing mixed results, if that. I would hate for us to say, like, we're getting poor results, but because we don't want to lose this money for these grants, we want to have them do something different that we'll also get mixed results on. So it's not to say that we don't do it, but it's almost to figure out what are the services they can provide that would be best beneficial in our district or the needs that a district might have. I think also, to your point, like for instance, IT services would not be one of those maybe right now. Or like, I know some districts use resources for some of their like school finance, school programming, like management type stuff. Well, that's not really where we would be at either. So like, I just almost a little bit curious as what other things does the Hamilton County,
Right,
what other services they're able to provide, or what other services they might also be providing for a district
right.
around us, that maybe, again, that might be a more specialty thing that we don't have the resources to do, or that they have an expertise in.
So the danger of having a school district that has decentralized budget management and spending is that you find a lot of grassroots kind of growth on things like this. And that's kind of how Hamilton County grew through different efforts. But like, we're looking at all the vendors on whether the consolidated spend or in all the grants consolidated, how can we use these to the best efficiency? Those are the kinds of conversations. So, yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, I would be curious, it says it's designated as a high-performing ESC. It would be interesting to know which of the services they provide are high-performing. Maybe they can granulate that a little bit. And I think to Brandon's point, just to expand on that, would they even have the capacity to serve us? I mean, we're a big district. And then the last thought I had was just a thought, but maybe maybe there's something about us that's so big, maybe we provide services to some of the other school districts because we've got capacity that the ESC does not have, and that could be a revenue source for us.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say that.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Totally in favor of that.
I mean, we might be bigger and better than the ESC in certain areas, I would suspect.
We are bigger and better than anybody because we're big dog.
But Brandon makes a good point.
And so just for the sake of time, I got
Hit
some,
it.
got some requests here, so I will,
Hit it.
I will do some research and we can bring this topic back
That'd be great.
at a future time. So the other side of that, Rob, is, and this is something I'm hoping for your support on, is, and Cody's done a great job with the contract KPI stuff. I won't go through the timeline here, but this was Treasurer Wagner and Mr. Hutchins' project, and they've worked on it. We really ramped up the key performance indicators for contracts from a few had them to how do we make them smart? How do we make them trackable? Last year, this winter at Finance Committee, you started seeing budget owners come in and talk about their performance measures and really have like rich conversations about it. And so we continue to do that, which is great. So, but I have a slightly different issue. And if you go to the next slide, Rob. This is,
You're going back.
thank you.
Invoice.
Thank you. All right, I have a slightly different. So there's 3 invoices here on the screen or on your slide deck. 2 of them are real. One of them was a phishing attempt. So someone sent it in and tried to get us just to pay it. Right? And honestly, there's not much difference in detail between the real ones and the phishing and the one that's a phishing. What we're hoping for your support in is to ask for activity measures in our contracts in addition to performance indicators. So part of this is, we do a KPI that says we're going to increase students, ACT performance by 10%. Okay, cool. I'm an ACT tutor. Okay. Well, I would also like on their side some activity measures. How many kids are you going to see? How many sessions are you going to do? How many hours are you going to spend? And I think it's just a matter of tightening up our vendor contracts to it makes it easier for us to make sure we're paying people correctly, making sure when we're paying invoices are paid correctly. It's going to help us do that per pupil analysis for some of these things because we're going to get those tight pupil numbers. It's going to help Cody's context with KPIs because, if we're saying, hey, we're spending 10 grand to get a 5% increase in something, that's great. But does it affect 5 kids or 20 kids, right? We would want to spend a 10 grand with a 5% increase for 20 kids versus 5. And then finally, to Ms. Haygood, part of our grant spending is things need to be reasonable and necessary. And so we need a little more data to determine if these costs are reasonable.
So, and just to add on to that the amount of fraud, stolen money is dramatically increasing every year. It's terrifying. And every organization are being attacked, especially school systems and churches and universities. The better we can protect ourselves against that kind of fraud, the risk it reduces. And so instead of getting an invoice that says, we're going to provide instructional services to X school, it needs to be outlined what those services are so that we can identify areas better. Does that make, right?
Yes. Yeah. This is not a commentary on any vendor we have today.
Correct.
Because I believe all of them are working to their best of their abilities to help our kids. But it's about making sure that we have the data to prove that.
Well, I'm missing the point, I think. So you want to change what?
So
Because what you're saying is it sounds like a contract with a vendor.
More
of what-
details in the contract.
yes.
Instead of just saying instructional services or,
More details in the invoice.
Both sides. So yeah, the contract, the invoice would match. So instead of saying, instructional services, we would want to say, 20 hours of instructional services per week for 15 weeks.
That's a reasonable ask.
so like that one invoice that's on the top right-hand side.
I know it's a reasonable ask of maybe 30 or 40% of what we do, but it isn't necessarily a reasonable ask regarding teaching. I mean, you're not, there's no qualitative thing to it. It's a quantitative thing.
True, but if you're contracting, so if you're contracting with a vendor to do that, they're gonna be there for a number of hours. That's your quantitative, and then your KPI measures are qualitative, right?
Sorta.
So, yeah, like.
I'm still,
Like-
I'm
like so-
sorry, too many years in the classroom.
or different, that we're really getting a return on our investment for our true vendors and the work that they say they're going to do.
Both. So, yes, so one of the concerns is for sure, and the reason I put the invoice out there is to show the level of detail, right?
Okay.
That someone create a fraudulent invoice with roughly the same level of detail as legitimate invoices, actually probably more level of detail. And so my point is just tightening up for our vendors and not making them change anything they're doing, but just specifying enough information in there that it makes it very clear what we're paying for at what level.
Jim?
For what it's worth, I mean, coming from my corporate experience, what they're asking for is SOP, standard operating. That's not an unreasonable ask, to have a little more information on.
Well, I mean, if you're making soap versus educating children, the measurements are different, but I'm not completely disagreeing. I'm with the superintendent on this, don't conflate those two things. If you had a better invoice and better contracts, you could have less opportunity for fraud. I understand that, I say, I got that connection. But the return on investment and whatever it's hard to go, so
Okay,
it's
so
standard operating procedure.
Priority is fraud. Second priority is grant compliance, because
Yes,
May Services is not gonna pass Title I test, right? So, and then the third level would be that we could get some unintended benefits on our return on investment conversation.
okay, so that's starting to frame it a little bit better for me.
So how about this example? So one of the return on investments is increase reading scores by 5%, which is an awesome thing. And so that's a measure that we can look at the test scores and say, did you do that or not? Okay, but what was the population of that? You know, did I spend $10,000 for a person to work with one kid? So the one kid's scores went up 5%, great. Or did I work with the entire school district or the entire school? Like I went through an entire grade level. You see what I'm saying? Like you start to get the numbers in to say, wow, this is really incredible. Versus this is good, this is an incredible change.
So contracts are not just talking about services, but you're talking about anticipated results of those services?
KPIs
We're
are
making,
based on
we're
results.
gonna make
yes.
people, we're gonna hold people accountable for the results, not just the services.
Well, I think
Brandon?
I think part of the point of us doing the KPIs in the first place was to start to figure out what contracts and what organizations we're working with that are actually providing a benefit.
Thank you very much.
And one of the things that we did when they did the contract review, and they went through every single one of the contracts, is they were noticing some groups were saying, hey, every year we're gonna work with 25 kids, so here's $50,000 you can give to us, right? And so I think what we've already been asking of them is to do the KPI. I think the struggle is, so you do a KPI, you do your contract, the contract says you're gonna provide these results at a school or whatever, and then your invoice says, May, I did work for you. July, I did work for you.
Yep,
And I think, and what I'm hearing from you all is idea would be that whatever you put in your contract as part of the agreement that we reach for you to provide services, that more detailed out so we can ensure that it meets grant requirements and other things, is also reflected in the invoice that you provide when you come to us and say, I need to be paid now for the work I've done. And in some ways, or at least matching up to work you've done that would warrant to pay based on the contract you signed. Because I don't think any one of those folks wrote a contract where in the contract they said, I'll provide services each month, and we said that was cool. But if they come back and say, okay, May's payment, like June's payment, July's payment, there's nothing that we have as a policy, from a policy standpoint or from a practice standpoint, that says that invoice isn't sufficient. And so I think to maybe like what Mike and what Jim were saying is that idea of first level is we got to ensure that what you're asking money for is a legitimate payment. So we're not paying somebody out who's giving a fraud payment. And the best way to do that is to match it up to what services you say you're going to provide as part of the contract and where you are on that. It also helps us in reviewing year to year and renewals and things like that, where we sit there and say, did they actually provide the services they said they would? But then the next layer down would be ensuring that there is a more consistent grant following and these type of things, so it makes it easier for the grants teams and others to do their work. And then that final part is, as a result of all of that, we will see a growth in theory, we should see a growth in the results. That then the board, as we review those contracts each year, can say, this contract was really successful. This contract didn't come anywhere near increasing results at this particular school. And I do think that's one of the harder parts on some of our KPIs right now, is that we as a board are never really having that discussion when we review contracts. We're more or less reviewing dollars. So we're not reviewing still the true results of benefits of certain programs outside of what's requested from the administration. So I think the administration is doing it, but like that's not part of our conversation point sometimes, and it's kind of difficult still because there's a lot of departments who are really still trying to learn how to do contract KPIs. But I think if we're asking them to match the data on their invoice to information that is congruent with what would be in their contract, I think that's a reasonable thing to ask them to do on a regular basis. Even for the most part, because I think if I saw an invoice that just said, evidence-based intervention, and you ain't told me what you did, you didn't put anything in there, and we know that you're supposed to be providing these services based on the contract, I think that would raise a lot of people's concerns as to what's going on. As opposed to, like, I've seen other invoices where you had to list out, like, all right, we serviced these 14 days, we provided these things over 13 weeks, whatever. So I think putting some type of consistency standard in place for how invoices should delineate what the services they provided were will help some of our contractors also to get in a better practice of providing information because it's a public record.
Superintendent, do you have a comment?
I was only going to share, I think we all want to make sure we're getting bang for our buck and what we pay for. And I do know that there has been a push to make sure they have the KPIs. And I thought that was the level of insurance for making sure we get the outcomes we're expecting. My request is maybe go back again to the educational piece of what the treasurer's office would be looking for as these contracts are coming in, because I think people are writing these up as they're supposed to based on what they know. But if there's something missing or something additional that we're learning now that needs to be addressed, I think people need just an opportunity to be able to do that. If we base this on what a test result was, by the time invoice comes in, that test is not going to come back out for another 3-4 months. So I'm not sure how we would then manage that, but it's worth a conversation.
And that's why this is like the beginning of that conversation, so we're taking everything to the next level. And so, yes, education is absolutely the next step.
Yeah, that was the thing, is we wouldn't
And that's
go-
the
we wouldn't go
sentence to
back.
start with. This is the start of a conversation, not
Right.
necessarily we want some support for this yet. But I think it's a great conversation. I think it's the natural place to go after the work that you all have been doing. But I just don't know how, who's gonna decide whether the results have been met? Who's in charge of that? It certainly can't be the treasurer's department to tell the rest of the district whether or not something got met. So it has to be the very people that, so it's just,
Yeah.
it's a great place to start this conversation. Anything that will make us more efficient and deliver better service for the best dollar spent, whatever, I'm in favor of that, but let's keep talking about, Brandon.
I was gonna say, I think there's two different things though here, and I think one is the KPI and the results they're getting, like valid results, or are they meeting them? That conversation, I think, happens separate from when I come to hand you my bill from providing work.
Yeah.
And you look at my bill and I say, May, did work. You're like, what did you do? Like, and I think that's the part from the treasurer's office end of it that they're bringing to our attention now as part of this conversation, is that we do need to have some standards for when an invoice is submitted, that we have information to show what's been done. And I think that's maybe true also for contracts where there's only one off. Because we do have a lot of contracts where it's a one-time purchase or a one-time buy on things, and we've held that standard to folks who bring in, like, you can't just bring in and say, I purchased food. And say, if you purchase food for an event, right? Like, we
Right.
hold that standard for a lot of these others. If we hold that same standard for a vendor who's providing regular services that might submit an invoice over multiple months, that to me seems like a good starting point to the conversation, because that at least gets us into a consistency of the expectations.
And I'm just thinking, it's a process to me. To me, this is, you're talking about a contract being very specific. Invoice is starting to say, well, this was done, and we'll decide whether or not to pay
No,
based
no, no, no,
upon-
no, that's not what this conversation is about, whether or not
Okay,
to pay
well, the
or
word
not.
invoice, I mean.
That's how you get paid,
helps-
though,
helps-
is they-
It is how we get paid.
No, I mean, that's how they get paid. Like, a vendor gets paid by submitting an invoice of work
Yes,
they did.
I understand that.
And I think what they're saying is that some of these invoices are coming in without any information to show that they even
All of them are, I
did
would
any work.
assume.
No.
No, not all of
I
them.
mean, a lot of vendors are very specific, and they'll give you hours, they'll give you days, they'll give you names, so but we don't really have a standard. And so like, there's two conversations, like the KPI conversation we've been having for several years. And
Sure.
And we've made a lot of progress,
Absolutely.
for sure. And I think we'll continue to make progress on that. But the day-to-day, what your contracts say to what your invoice say, do we have enough information to look at that and understand exactly what's being provided and exactly what we're paying for?
I'm just saying, though, an invoice puts this upstairs. I mean, is this who's in charge of what? I'm not, is it the person, help me out here.
Yeah, what they're asking for is reasonable. We're going to collect some extra data when we get these invoices. That data may help augment the KPI review, but the primary purpose of that is to prevent fraud, and we'll get a little extra data that might be useful for the KPI.
See, I don't think the primary thing is fraud.
Absolutely, absolutely
I
it
think
is.
it's delivery of service.
No. This
Okay.
this is so that we don't pay an invoice that we shouldn't. That's
Gotcha,
the primary
gotcha,
purpose
gotcha.
of this, and I
And-
think that's a reasonable ask.
I understand it's reasonable, I just think that this is huge.
I mean,
ahead.
we require this for, I'm sorry. we
Wait,
re-
superintendent, let me do the superintendent.
I'll be real quick, Nan. I don't know if this is possible. This seems simple to me. Are we able in our process to have our own invoice standard that we give to the people and say, this is what we need you to return as your invoice? And it has, this is what we're looking for.
Finish?
Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We just, I mean, we just need like support if we roll this out, because we'll get pushback from some vendors.
Well, you're asking for support again, you're asking the committee to say, you're asking us to agree to something right now and support it when you roll it out. This isn't the start of a conversation.
So my suggestion would be to go back and produce a document that has those standards on it and then bring it back.
Okay.
So there is a list of standards, but he's asking to expand the standards to help prevent fraud.
And you may want to, when you have your internal conversation, just consider other people in the organization.
Always.
Yes.
We'll go, and then we'll go over to Nan, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, we do require this level of reporting for our employees. If an employee has a personnel rec for extended time, they have to do a timesheet. It has to go through work through, it has to get approved. So, we put our employees through these hoops to verify they're doing the work they promised to do. So why wouldn't we put our vendors, at that same expectation of telling us what they did, when they did it, did they do it, were they in the building? So we're just asking for the same accountability, from our vendors.
I understand that's quantitative, that's not qualitative. I mean, I can tell you when I went in the building and when I left the building, I was there that many hours, that works. But if you're teaching the history of Russian Revolution and whether or not all children got it or not, it's just, these are things that we do in this organization that are very difficult to measure. But no, we're doing the conversation. I'm sorry, Lauren, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to support the conversation. So we've issued audit recommendations about this in the past, most specifically around transportation.
Yes.
So I would just offer our support from internal audit, because what we would look for just from an audit standpoint, especially as Nan's alluded to, is can we tie things all through? Does it all make sense? Is it all logical? I think we've observed a lot of progress with this concept on our purchase orders. One specific area would be around our P cards. Not that we used to do this, but for example, a blanket for stuff doesn't really tell us what we're going to do. Whereas a blanket for these specific purchases, now as auditors, we say, yes, this makes sense. It allows us to see through the eyes of those who maybe understand and kind of know what they're intending to say. But in fact, when it's documented, it keeps us all in compliance. So happy to support the effort, and I think there's a lot of opportunity of ways to go with it.
Great. Jim?
In terms of fraud, is a significant risk area, would it be through the then and now? Would that be where some of this risk is high?
Yes.
And so if the risk is high with then and now, and I think we've talked about this before, I would be all in favor of tightening the controls on then and now and have some teeth in that if someone does a then and now, that they it goes on their performance review or something. Let's reduce those. If that's a significant risk area, then let's go after that. Because I can see where we're going to pay an invoice that nobody's looking at.
So there are legitimate reasons to have it then and now, for urgent cases, it's parent-teacher night and we forgot to order name tags and somebody runs to Staples and gets name tags. That's legitimate then and now, but it's the trend or the amount and the habit. So, yeah, I would
I'll
agree with you.
support whatever you want to do that. Reduce
Okay.
fraud.
So, are we starting to close this out? And what do you want? Do you want the committee to say, go ahead, do this? You want the committee to say, let's continue the conversation? Do you want to involve the internal auditor, chief? Where is it that you want? I mean, I think
I would like the committee to say, go ahead, but I mean, I want to make sure all of your concerns are addressed.
that's right, Brendan?
Only thing I would say is, I think if we are producing some type of document that might be like either a new guidance or a new standard of an invoice or something to that effect, then maybe we can bring that back to this committee, and then whether or not it needs to be a policy perspective. That's the other thing. That's the only thing I don't think it needs to be one, but I would want to make sure that we are not changing something that would then be not reflected in whatever our policies are with regards to how vendors utilize us, or how we pay vendors. Because I don't really recall on the top of my head what that policy looks like. So it may be something that would go through policy committee also, but I do think if you maybe bring back a document for next month that may reflect either the standards that we would be doing or a sample invoice that folks could utilize to submit when they're, as a vendor, asking for payment. That might make it a little easier for us to then be able to process and make a support or.
Recommendation. Yes, go ahead, thank you.
The purchasing department does collaboration when it comes to, the purchasing department does collaboration when it comes to looking at contracts and determining like hours and things like that. So the physical contract that my contract administrator Yolanda Johnson does, she actually works with vendors on that as well. But what happens is when you put it into the Business Plus system, which is our contract module, and those lines go through and the PO go out, that may change things, right? Because they might not put it in the correct way. So when an invoice come in, it comes in like Mike and them saying just made payments. So just collaborating with the treasurer's office, we do work with AP closely. We can actually look at that, look at training and kind of come up with something to where we require them to put in a certain line item description that will help when it moves over to the PO.
Okay.
And the vendor is actually invoicing the district back, that when AP gets it, they actually can bring it up and kind of see that the PO does match the lines. And then we do have those hours and things like that, because in our contracts, we do specify how many hours they work and things like that, but it may not just go on the contract module line, which actually takes a big, huge play into when the invoice comes in.
And that's Business
So-
Plus or something, or something?
Yes, Business Plus, our contract module.
So the actual legal contract might have that detail in it,
Yes.
but
Right.
when the secretary enters it into the financial system, she might say monthly services.
Right.
Just to summarize. And so what we're saying is, let's expand the purchase order to match the services that are in the contract.
Right.
And could Business Plus accommodate that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
This is just more of an expansion on getting more efficient, more protection, and more transparency
I
on what we're spending
also-
money on.
Anticipating, we have at least a few members who, on the board, will also say, it's already too hard to deal with CPS as a vendor, or what have you, and that's a common concept, comment, I should say. We don't want to make it so hard as to people don't want to do business with us, or we delay something, a payment or whatever, that it's too delayed and they just decide to not do business with us. But other board members are gonna say, well, I don't know how difficult you want to make this, but it seems like, maybe I'm being subjective here, but it sounds like, can you report back more things, having addressed what you heard this month?
Yeah.
Next month? And loop in these folks, whether it's purchasing or whether it's the audit chief? What, anything else,
So,
gentlemen?
So, Ms. Murphy, is there somebody on your side, academic side, that you would like to participate in this conversation?
I think Mike is connected with, Assistant Superintendent Badgett on working with him.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, well, then we'll have this as part of the, and Mike will make sure this is part of the agenda next month. And Treasurer Wagner will just have to tune in for this exciting, because I can guarantee you it's not going to be film at 11. Okay, let's keep going. I enjoyed that. That was good.
All right, so given that we have 1 minute left on the,
No, that's not my
it's
fault.
almost
It's your
noon.
fault.
no,
Go
I know,
ahead.
But do you want to like reshuffle, like?
Nope,
shuffle-
let's keep doing it.
going? Okay.
Let's get it all done. Some of this is stuff we delayed from a couple of months ago, actually.
I think the next one is upcoming request for proposals, which is Ms. Levens.
A Google sheet that,
Is that this?
it's actually this last,
The one that's lettered,
Oh, yeah?
Oh,
yeah.
do you have a Google sheet?
This one, the long one?
Yes, the long one, but it's kind of hard to see on that.
It's all right, we've got sheets.
Okay.
And I have new bifocals, so we're in good shape.
It's hard for me to see it. Okay, on this actual Google sheet, what we did was, we identified requisition contracts that went through the system this year that will require us to either do or look at a cooperative or a request for proposal bidding opportunity. So our cooperative, is where we will actually look at to make sure the cooperative is still in good standing. Do it go out past the time it says. So some of this cooperative do end, they have dates similar to just like the bidding RFP does. They have an end date. So we have to make sure that that end date matches what we put in the system. So on this actual sheet, we identify all the RFPs that's possibility that may go through this coming FY '27 school year. And it depends on if that actual service will continue what the actual department will let us know. Do they still want to continue services? Do they want to, maybe look at extending the services or things like that? So we just gave a list of the ones we identified that we know that will need to be looked at this coming school year. And typically, the purchasing department will look and work with the schools and departments around the same time they do the budgeting. I think it's maybe in January. So we can kind of get an outlay of like, will you have this service continue next year? We ask those type of questions, so they will have a better understanding on what they need to do for us on our side of the house to make sure that we're not doing it at the last minute. And so on here, even though we have a lot of lines on here, if you go to row, I think that's M, it would tell you that row M has the cooperative and RFP number. And like 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, that was the same RFP. It's just that they actually selected 3 different vendors for that particular RFP. So collectively, we just look at that one RFP and split out those services. And similar to that again, if you go down a couple of more lines, you will see that we have another 1 RFP, but 3 different vendors. It's because that's just one RFP, but we still gotta look at it in that way. So what we did was, we actually pulled out of Business Plus the RFP number to see collectively how many vendors are under this one RFP. So that means that we may not have to do an RFP for every vendor on this list, but we have to look at the services to decide, like, are we gonna continue these services? That means that we may have to do an RFP for those services, depending on what that is. And this is what this is telling us. Just like they did with Hamilton County, we put Hamilton County at the bottom, because it goes across various departments and various school buildings, and everyone uses them. So we want to make sure that we're going to collectively look at that to decide that it has an RFP on it. But this RFP go across a lot of different stuff. So that's where we are with the RFPs this coming FY27 school year.
Okay. So these would be anticipating for FY '26 or FY '27?
We'll be working through them in FY26, but they're before FY27.
Jen?
This was part of the request from either somebody on the board or in this committee. They wanted to know what was coming up for renewal.
Yes, I
for
think,
proposal.
I think that was a board member.
Yeah.
And these are the ones.
Yes, these are the ones we identified so far, because the more, as we continue throughout the school year, we may add to this list depending on what people
Okay.
put into the system.
All right.
But it's a lot of work for a tiny little department.
Yeah.
Seriously. Brandon?
I think this is also just another great example of a chance where we can, on some of these where there's a cooperative, where there might be 2 or 3 vendors we've been using, to think about how we're using those services and whether or not
Yes.
the way we bid it out is the way we want to continue to bid it out. Because I think, and sometimes in some cases, we've had ones where we bid out because at some point in the midst of providing those services, we needed more.
Yep.
And so we may have a vendor who's doing less, but they probably could do more at a different rate and these type of things. So I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, because I think that is something for us to be thinking about as we build budgets in the future.
That's a good call out, because we thought about that as well. How we feel like, when we do our contracts now, our contract administrator, she looks at it and say, okay, we have this particular vendor for this service, but what other services can they provide? And, let's have that for, they can use that, our district can use that, right? So we're trying to kind of be a little bit, just like you mentioned, and it helps us be leveraging too when it comes to looking at up.
Any other comments, questions? So we'll be watching these, and we'll, I'll try to remember which board member is particularly interested in about the RFPs coming up. The other issue there is, I know one of the things when we pass on particular contracts, or, the treasurer's report, it's like, this is the second year of a 3-year contract. I think it'd be very helpful to board members to understand that this is second year, we've got 3 more to go, and I think you've been doing more and more of that reporting. I think that's very helpful.
We color-coded it for you,
I know.
right? So yes.
I love it. Appreciate it. Next item.
I think we're to budget planning, I believe.
So back to the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so. Chief
Brandon,
Rob,
this is
Chief Rob
one of your
isn't here.
things too. Go ahead. Mike?
So, yeah, so, thanks to Mr. Craig's assignment to us. Appreciate that. Superintendent and I put together a very preliminary budget planning group, so want to thank Mr. Baggett, Mr. Burkhart, Mr. Gallahue for volunteering or being voluntold on tonight's committee.
Sure.
Yeah, either way, we're glad they're there.
It's all right, you're buying them lunch, so go ahead.
There you go, so. He's like, wait.
It's an invoice, I love it.
So we did have our first meeting this week, which was good, just to kind of get together and talk through some stuff. We did a recap of this year's process and did some kind of brainstorming at a very high level about big picture sort of things, needs and such. If you go to the next slide, Rob.
Jim.
The recap, was that for the budget we just put together?
Yes.
This year's means really this year's budget.
This year's budget,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah, so like we're doing a series of, in different groups, kind of plus deltas, which actually would love, and maybe we'll do this as a survey to ask the board members, what they liked about this year's budget process, which may be nothing, and what they would like to change for next year. But we kind of do the same thing with that group. We're doing one internally with the treasurer's office team. Just, what worked well, what didn't work well. So we have a process place to start.
Jim?
Use your own judgment, but it might be interesting for us to hear, as a board, to hear from you guys about how this is going periodically. Would that be fair, Brandon?
They want to do it, they can. I mean, I think the feelings about how the last budget process went may not need to be something they do on a regular basis, but maybe, we do track pretty often through our meetings, how we're doing along the budget and how things are operating in that end. So I think it is good to maybe have a regular reach outs to the rest of the board if they are not tuning into our wonderful meetings every month.
Yeah, I definitely, if we had more time, I'd like to get kind of your individual feedback of what you thought worked well with the process, what you thought we could do better on the process level.
It could be just with this committee more so than the whole board.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
I do think that budget development does come through this committee rather than the whole board. And I would love it, that it is not in the environment of crisis management, which the last 2 years it's been. And that's no way to build a budget. And so if we can eliminate the crisis management, even though we know we got a crisis for preschool and crisis in federal grants and what have you, if we can have it so that it's not crisis management, and it actually is building a budget, like that we need to pay people, or people need a raise, and start that way rather than necessarily compare the coming year with the current year and figure out what we can't do or whatever. I know we have to do part of that, but it'd be really great to actually build it based upon what we would like to do.
And some of our conversation.
And not start with wish lists or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly, 'cause some of the conversation is about process versus the numbers. Like
Yes.
the numbers aren't going to be wonderful and great. Like if we had enough money to give everyone everything you wanted, this would be really simple. But taking
No,
aside
it probably wouldn't be, because you know what? We wouldn't be doing a good job of doing it because people would just be spending money and doing stuff.
True. So, but separating out the process and how did the process work, or how can we do the process better to get to the right decisions at the right time?
That's right.
So, for sure. So we'll continue to meet, and kind of clarify, the takeaways and what we're trying to do.
Even if you guys brought back the takeaways next month for us and how you want to address those takeaways, to even see if the finance committee is like an agreement from our perspective. We weren't in the internal, but we were watching outside. So, I mean, I think that would be great.
Okay. A couple other things just for the budget process. So I started compiling a key activities document. Hopefully you saw that, to try to put a calendar around the budget. So we have some interesting things this year. One of the things is our November forecast is now an October forecast.
Kev.
The good news is, we use a November forecast to set our target, so we'll be able to set our target a little bit earlier. But it also means, there'll be more activities to happen between forecasts that could change our target. So
Sure.
it's good and bad. But we'll try to continue to refine that document about the timeline and get it to a point where we can share it out, get some feedback from this committee and then get it shared out so everyone knows, kind of the timeline we're working from. We talked about feedback. The other thing is, Treasurer Wagner had the Esser Cliff for how many years do you have that, Jen? 4? Yeah. 4 years of Esser Cliff. So I'm going with the federal funds ridge. So, and we've talked about this, that, our federal funds are decreasing. So it's not a cliff. We're not falling off the cliff. But we're coming off the top of a ridge. So we need to be cognizant about that. And then my other final caution is the time to make structural changes is very soon. So if we want to, as we kind of talk through our team and talk in this committee, the sooner you make structural changes to what we're trying to do.
Help me out with structural. You're talking about which schools to remain open or closed, or are you talking about structural process? What are we talking about?
Which schools remain open and closed would be a huge structural change. So
Yes.
Staffing formulas would be another huge
Big stuff.
structural change. Elimination of any sort of services, like if we said.
Well, no, we can afford summer school next year.
Yeah, like if we said we're gonna get out of the blank business, summer school business.
Because we're not gonna be able to, considering it's grant heavy.
Like now's the time to start thinking about that.
Well,
so
that
people
changes
can
your
make their
whole
plans.
instructional year. If you're
Yes.
not gonna have summer school, it's gonna change what you're doing in October.
Absolutely.
I mean, for our children, in fairness to them. Or parents planning. Could I add to your timeline this coming retreat, board retreat? We have topics for the board retreat, and one of the topics, if we can move to that, one is this budget. And you all helping us with the superintendent's efforts, we need to spend a significant portion of that retreat on the budget piece starting. Brandon?
I was gonna say, part of the assignment that was tasked over was also for them to create kind of a structure or template to how we talk about the budget.
Yes.
And I think, and part of that is, and the reason I wanted to have them do that early is because I think they're gonna be hard decisions that absolutely we're gonna have to make and discuss through and go through that stuff at the October meeting. But we need to build the relationships up with our partners, so having the unions at the table ready to start doing the budget task force in October, as opposed to doing it in March and April.
That's right.
Having folks be ready to have conversations so we can get our staffing sheets done on time, so we know, so things that really also help to understand how the district will operate. And I think that's one of the things I'm appreciating about the conversation about this federal funds ridge idea, is that there are things that we are gonna have to say to a school, yeah, it sounded nice, it was working great, but there's no dollars for it this year. And allow them to prepare for that now, as opposed to way we typically have done it, where we have them prepare for it after we do their budgets, after we do all these other conversations. But I do think, yes, we need to have that conversation there. We also may need to have the conversation around like what is personnel and certain issues that are not federally required, state required, some form of legal required. Some of those staffing, we can do some things to be creative within the district to provide those resources. So having that conversation as part of the October meeting to at least get us started on it, at least get us building that, so they can bring us back something more or quicker on time would be a great place to start.
Well, I would put out a plea to the two members besides myself on finance and to the superintendent and to the treasurer to make it very clear with President Moffett that we are anticipating that we will spend a significant portion of the retreat on this budget dialogue that has to take place. Because invariably it starts to get undone or it gets to lower priority. We've lived through that again and again, but this is institutional and culturally changing. Well, you know, it's important. So I'll take that to her that we want that and I'll need support on that. Because we always have a agenda issue for that. Okay? We're running somewhat out of time for sure, and we want to cover a number of things yet. Let's keep going.
So.
You want to share that with us?
Yes, I would, yes. So, and just like to quickly share my draft goals. Go ahead, Rob, for the next year. And so you should have the full document available that has a lot more text, but I tried to focus on three like buckets.
Okay,
Improve systems, reporting and fiscal accountability, increase community outreach and engagement, and it's just continuing building our team culture and performance. And then I have some items under there. I think for the sake of time, it might be if you want to give me feedback, like via email or.
that'd be great. Is that okay with you, Brandon?
take some
It's
time to
okay
read
with
it?
me,
Okay.
appreciate it.
That'd be-
And I'd appreciate the extra time to think about it too, and us do it individually, I think is quite all right.
And then we can come back and,
Sure,
all right, go quickly through two policy things. So
yes,
policy 6520 is payroll deductions. It needs a little update. There are some things that aren't listed in the payroll deductions list, just that we, for whatever reason, like, when, you know, we offered, starting the last year, to people to be able to pay their background check fees as a payroll deduction.
okay,
It's not in the policy, so that needs to be done. Recovery of payroll overpayments.
do you have a draft for that?
Yes.
Is it okay with everybody here that it not come here first and just go directly to policy? Or do you? So just do that draft and submit it to Hoyne and to Mr. Lindy.
Thank you. I will do that. And then the next thing that is.
This is
kind of big.
crazy.
This is a big one. Yeah, this is still shocking to me. I mean, Lauren forwarded the email to us and I'm like, this is shocking.
Unbelievable.
I'm shocked. But the Ohio Ethics Commission ruled that
Unusual name
yeah,
for those
public-
people.
that public officials are now allowed to use rewards with purchases they make. And they have, for years, banned folks from getting things like airline miles, hotel points, you know, even to the point where we don't allow people.
Football tickets.
That one's still, that one's a little
That's
different.
still-
That's still not good. That one's still not good. Yeah, that was good. Like, wait, no.
Baseball tickets.
Even to the point where we don't allow people to use Kroger Plus
That's
cards when they
right.
buy stuff because it's a rewards thing. And this is
But now, here we are.
yes, this is a complete reversal of traditional policy. And the Ohio Ethics Commission rulings are legally binding. So that's the interesting thing about it is if they say it's good, you're good.
Please.
I will say, like, the way at least is worded in here, though, is that you can receive the benefit if you otherwise would have made the same purchase. I think that's where we tend to get people in trouble, is when folks say, I'm gonna go buy all of the food for this event at Kroger because I have Kroger Plus points, not
Yes.
because it's at the best price for the district to purchase from
Yes,
them.
so you
or-
still have to, like you can't go to book, say, a trip and be like, oh, I'm a Sky Miles member, so I'm flying Delta when the American Airlines flight is $200 cheaper. Like, you still have to use the lowest
Judgment.
cost and best, yes. It's not a blanket, but we spend a crazy amount of time in our department and angst telling people, oh, you can't use your Kroger Plus card. Oh, you booked a hotel and like, I think it's one of the major changes, just automatically enrolls you in the rewards program. Like, they don't even ask, you just, and so then
Yeah.
you spend hours on the phone with them trying to get those rewards points taken off. So if, yes.
Please.
Here, yeah.
Briefly, just it's a fine line with the Ohio Ethics Commission, so I still would encourage all employees, it's our responsibility as public officials to be familiar with the law and to uphold the side of the ethics law that says we cannot personally benefit from our public positions. However, as Mike is saying, this really is that secondary side of things where through the course of normal business, you earn these rewards. It's not punitive any longer, but I still would just exercise caution and personal benefit from our roles, of course.
Are we able, even though this is the Ethics Commission, we have to do kind of what they say, obviously. And I don't know if there's some kind of policy change that we have to have as a result of this, that it comes back here and then goes to policy. In writing up the administrative guidelines, though, can we make more strict or make more specific the guidelines as to how we will operate, as long as it's in accordance with the Ethics Commission is saying? Are we able to do that, Jen? or-
Yes, you can always be stricter. All this does is prevent an employee from getting their license taken away because of that thing. But that doesn't mean the district has to adopt that as a policy. You can, if the board doesn't want to support this because of the fear of what we were talking about, you can write in your policy that, but if somebody makes the mistake and does it anyway, they're just saying ethics won't come after them, right?
So then will you all have Mr. Hoyne or somebody create a policy and then also have the superintendent and treasurer folks create the appropriate guidelines? Brandon?
I might suggest, as we take it back to policy, as Vice President Bolton was talking about, I think that it also might be helpful to distinguish certain things for which we
Oh, yeah.
recognize and appreciate that, like, the hotel, for instance, is a great example. Like, you're booking a hotel for, you're going to a conference, that's the conference hotel. There is no reason why you should not be able to enjoy that benefit of the hotel mile or hotel points or whatever, versus purchases that we make that have multiple places where we would want to ensure that you're still using the cheapest or the most cost efficient or being fiscally smart with it. And in some ways that's true with travel, right? Like air flights, you also probably shouldn't be, upgrading or picking the flight where you can upgrade the easiest versus the flight that might be the most cost efficient. So if you're paying for $800 flight because you want to use Delta, so you can upgrade your Delta with your Delta, that's the stuff I think that they would still say creates a problematic part there. But you simply, if you're making that purchase anyway, I don't see why we should penalize folks if we get that. But finding a way to write for general counsel and policy to kind of work through that part.
So let's send it to policy. It doesn't need to come back here. Is that okay with you all?
Send it to
All
policy.
right. Move it right to them and express our interest of not necessarily being loosey-goosey about it.
The one other exception is for anything where they have a personal interest in the
Oh, yeah.
entity for which they would get the benefit, might still be a violation of ethics. So
The other thing I read is you can't bundle. So I can't be like, oh, we're all flying to somewhere. Hey, put all of it on my credit card and I'll use my Sky
Oh.
Miles for all of your tickets, because now you're getting an oversized amount of rewards for that. So but those are procedural things.
Right. Jim?
This is a suggestion, to Brandon's point, maybe there's a way to monitor that or audit that based on a dollar amount. I don't know, just an idea.
All right, we have a couple other items, and one we want to make sure we get to, which is the closing thoughts, but we also have this curious item on the agenda, which is insourcing. Do you have a initial start of this conversation with this committee?
Sure. We do have a PowerPoint. Very short. I also have some documentation here that goes a little bit further than the PowerPoint. So we actually breached this question back in 2022, post-COVID. If you remember.
Yep.
We had a transportation implosion back in 2022 in which we did not have enough buses or drivers. To meet the needs of the district, whereby I think we had about 2,700 students who were not able to get on Yellow Bus. And so we made some decisions at that point. So really, as we look at what the ask is, we have about 1,200 students. Currently, we're looking at about 486 daily routes within that. If you can go to the next slide, Rob,
How many students did you just say?
12,000
There you go.
on Yellow Bus.
Yeah.
So as we look at some of the other things that are unique to Cincinnati, we have a lot of what I call curb to curb and closer stops. Curb to curb really is dictated by the IEP, but here we have closer stops. And what that closer stops means, in most cases, and I'm going to say in most cases, students are coming out of their house and maybe going down the street a house or two, versus in a lot of districts, you're going to the next intersection or you're walking up to a half mile. And so that is a luxury that we in Cincinnati think it's important, but this is one of the discussions that we would talk about as we do an insourcing versus outsourcing, if we are looking to capitalize on some savings. We have a two-tiered system, so we have a 7:40, 8 o'clock, 8:50, and 9:10. So those 7 o'clock buses drop students off at 7:40, then they start their 8:50 route. The 8 o'clock buses will drop students off and start their 9:10 route. We would need about 300 buses. So right now, today, we have 286 buses that are on the road, and those are our three vendors, Peterman, UTS, and First Student. Those are all 72 passenger capacity buses. With that, we would need approximately 10 to 15% overages in case buses break down or there's issues. So we're rounding that up to about 300 buses is what we would need currently for a insourcing situation. We actually, back in 2022, actually put out a bid to purchase buses. That bid came back, I think, around $135,000 per bus. Note that Ohio is one of the most strict states in the country in relation to how the buses are painted, what the windshield wipers look like, what are the colors of the stripes on the side, the letters, the top of the bus, the type of windshield that's installed. So Ohio is really a tough state to buy buses for. If we were to buy buses today, you're looking at about $150,000 per bus times 300 buses, and you'll see that's about 47 million, give or take, at this point if we were to buy buses for our entire district. We would also need facilities for those buses. Right now, currently, with our three vendors, we have 5 facilities that house the roughly 315 buses that are utilized throughout the district. If we were to insource it, I don't know that we would need 5, but we would need at least 2 or 3 strategically located throughout the city so that we are not driving all the way across the city in between routes, as well as starting off, we would want a hub or a lot on the west side to handle the west side schools. Theoretically, you would want a hub in the central corridor to handle the central schools and one in the east to handle the east schools. And because our district is so vast, north and south, it might be good to have something, if you have a central north, maybe have a central south as well, so that we're not, again, traversing 20 square miles to get from one end to the other. Yes. Sure, absolutely. Okay, thank you. So as we look at driver salaries, right now we're looking at the $9 to $12 million for driver salaries. That would be salaries and fringe benefits, and that would be just to try to stay competitive with those other markets out there and those other vendors. As you're talking about a CDL, we know that the country is approximately 60 1,000 drivers down every single day with CDLs. So getting CDL drivers will also be very challenging. We've estimated about $4 to $6 million in fuel and maintenance. Standing up a bus garage with those mechanics and maintenance would be a significant lift for us. Licensing, insurance, administration costs, we're averaging to be about $3 million. That would be really making sure that our buses are legal, having those inspections done yearly, along with everything that goes into that. So we're really looking at, a total operating cost per year, somewhere between 14 and 21 million. I know that's a pretty big gap, but depending on how we're going to extrapolate, whether we're going to start early or small and then build into it, or if we're actually going to say we want to insource this within, a shorter period of time. As we look at the third slide, it's really talking about the timing of all this. So the timing is set up in 4 stages, and those 4 stages are really there concurrently, although we do realize and would advocate that we overlap some of those a little bit. So if we were to buy a bus today, it would take us anywhere from 36 to 48 months to acquire the entire fleet. Now, a smaller fleet would obviously take less time, but you're looking at an average of about 24 months for a pretty quick turnaround, to 36 months, which would be average. 48 months would be if you're really going to ask a vendor to supply us 300 buses, it's going to take them at least 48 months to be able to ramp up for that. We're looking at property acquisition would probably be the next longest piece. That would be 12 to 24 months. I will say that there are other bus vendors that are out right now looking for property in Cincinnati, and they have been looking for 2 years. And so if you consider a 1 acre of land would house roughly 30 to 40 buses, you're looking at a substantial number of acreage to not only house those buses, but be able to have a garage and a place for drivers to come in as well. So you're looking at the infrastructure of not only a garage, but also a place for drivers to come in, grab their keys, a break spot, if you will, as well as a training spot for them. So that becomes a 12 to 24 month of planning and execution. I do also think that that's a little aggressive with looking into, and I'm calling it looking into, a spot that would be that big enough for us to handle. And then obviously putting all that training and implementation together with finding drivers, as well as doing some pilots and having those conversations across the board. So we have some key risk factors involved, but from beginning to end, if you were to say today we want to insource all of our transportation, it would be looking at about 5 years from now to be actually implemented in some sort of short or smaller group. 7 years if you're talking about all 300 routes at this point. So a lot of this data also came from 2 years ago and then kind of updated to current, but also take into consideration if we change how we do transportation, directly affects each one of these pieces that we would look at.
This is great. I love it. Jim?
Yeah, I don't understand. Why would we do this? You didn't answer that question at all.
There's a case study for doing it, and there's a case study for not doing it. So I'll give you some of the pros and some of the cons. Obviously, right now, we have 3 vendors that are running our yellow bus out of 5 lots, as well as our white fleet. So to manage that, just to manage the vendors, is a big lift. We also don't have a lot of control over what is happening across all of those vendors.
I have to leave in 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Do we save money? Is what I'm curious about.
So yes and no. So in the long term, yes, we would probably save money. We'd have to look at exactly what that looks like from a break-even standpoint. You're investing, close to $100 million in year one. which is gonna take you, 5 or 6 years before you even get to that break-even point. The things that you have to consider, though, the most expensive, like with our teachers, is human capital. And can you get the human capital you need to be able to stand up this many routes? And that's challenging for every bus vendor, not only in Cincinnati, but across the United States right now. So do you want I'm gonna call it the headache and hassle to do that? Which is, the intrinsic part of the question and discussion.
Brandon?
Just really quick, two thoughts is, one is, security with regards to the maintenance shops as well as where you'd be keeping the buses. Is that included in those operating costs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so it's hard to say what size of bus lot we would need, because obviously we have 5 right now with our vendors. Not all of those have a mechanic and location at each one of those. So there's a positive and negative to that. If a bus breaks down and you're at one of the lots that doesn't have it, you now have to tow your bus to the lot that has it. So if we were to have 5 or 4 bus lots, we would want 4 garages with 4 sets of mechanics, which would extrapolate. If we only wanted 2, that there would be a big difference there. So that's why on the amounts that we've put on the sheet here, they have a big range, because we don't know what we don't know as far as what we want this to look like yet.
And I think the other thing is, I do think we would have to have a conversation around how we utilize transportation in the district if we were going to take it in-house, because I don't think we can operate in-house at the level that we do currently, realistically, because it just is, we can say that we're gonna hire all these drivers and it's gonna be great and they're gonna work, and invariably, if we don't, we're stuck in a position where we have kids who don't have bus service, and we are back out to outsourcing to a vendor to provide those same services, even though we may have the vehicle itself here. So I would maybe say that we'd also, in addition to having that conversation, have to have a conversation about our long-term transportation plans. Because additionally, the 7th and 8th grade is the other part I was thinking about, which is how we provide services for 7th and 8th grade. If we started providing our own service, would we be doing that for the non-public schools in that same manner, right? So like, are we providing them the same bus service, or are we providing them a different vendor to do it as opposed to our person? And again, I think that's all part of that conversation we'd ultimately have if we decide to make that decision to go forward with this.
Absolutely. And I think the other question and discussion that we have to have is, we've always thought about transportation as binary. Either you're walking or you're not, or you're on Yellow Bus or you're not, or you're on Metro or you're not, or you're on White Fleet or you're not. And how do we look at this and say, how could we employ 2 of those, or multiple ways of getting there? So do we have a Yellow Bus take the older students to a transit center and then they get to school, or vice versa? Do we pick them up at a transit center and then take them the last mile? Always in transportation, the last mile is the most expensive. And so that's typically from school to home, is getting from those 67 locations to, the 36,000 houses or housing locations within the city.
I think that's, to me, that what you just discussed, the whole binary piece, I think also knowing all the various parts of transportation. It's my recollection that transporting our special needs kids is extraordinarily expensive. Is there a way we can make that less expensive? Is there a way we could do other parts of it less expensive? So maybe a follow-up to this would be breaking things a bit apart. This is fabulous, but thinking in terms of what kinds of things could be cost efficient, or even possible or practical to serve the purpose.
The one issue with our specialized transportation that we've been wrestling with for a while is that over the number of years, we have not had the space in our buildings that we needed to for those students who have special needs. And so by default, if there's not room at a given school, we find the next closest school. Well, once that student is in that school, we don't want to disrupt that student or that family, and we end up keeping that student there for, if it's a first grader, we keep them there for 6, 7, or 8 years, which may not be the easiest or most efficient transportation. So we have a lot of schools where we're transversing 3, 4, 5 schools to get a student to a school, but we also don't want to upset the apple cart and say to student, parent, and teacher and paraprofessional, we need to pick you up and move you to a different school. And so there's a lot of discussion that as we have now, due to the growth plan, some room in some buildings, we can start right-sizing those now so that 8 years from now, we're in a much better location than we are currently today.
So it's big, it's big thinking and, okay. Thank you so much for that. That'll start to get everybody talking and thinking, and there'll be at least 3 companies that'll start to be very worried about whether or not we're gonna be doing this. Maybe it's a good time to talk contract. Okay, are we close to the end here?
The next topic is a building utilization discussion, but
Yeah, how do we, you, go ahead. Should we do that now, or should we delay? Tell us, is there anything? Maybe is that all part of enrollment?
It's really
whatever?
Chris.
Are we talking about the growth plan?
Building utilization, yeah.
Utilization, do we have anything to report regarding any of that part? I'm not sure.
it might be better to wait till enrollment settles out.
That
and
would
give
be
you
great.
your current data.
So I think we had, Jeremy and I had the short conversation a couple of days ago, and we're finding that the projections versus what our enrollment was, I believe, on the first day of school, were really, really surprisingly, not surprisingly, but really, really close to what we had said. So I think Evanston came up in an earlier conversation at 250. Evanston's currently at 270. So the ability for us to look at and project where those students were going, they actually ended up in those schools, and right-sizing those schools, I think from our standpoint early on is really great. I will defer, to wait about a week or 2 to see where everything settles, but from all the indications in all the discussions I've had with folks, this has been great, and all the schools opened on time with all the right furniture from the growth plan, in the right places with the right teachers, and so I'll defer to the superintendent, but everything that I've seen has been fantastic.
Superintendent?
Of course, I agree with Mr. Burkhart, but it is true. We were really watching those middle schools and junior highs, and they seem all to be coming in above. I'll need to check South Avondale's numbers, but very, very, very close. And so we're super, super pleased.
And back on transportation, I haven't received any emails or calls or people at my door.
Yay!
But I'm not, and I don't usually get those, other board members do.
So
We've
So
had several, the media has been really great to us leading up to opening day and beyond. And we've had remarkable transportation stories that have run, not so much with all the neighboring districts, but I'm super pleased with some of the changes that have been put in place, and with working with Metro and our yellow bus vendors in order to make sure. I was super pleased. I have to tell you, if you don't know, our internal transportation team had every student routed by August 1, and that is extremely helpful. And so we have still hundreds of families coming in to enroll. So that will take a little bit of time, but I'm super pleased with customer care center, transportation. Everybody is doing a fabulous job.
So anecdotally, on the first day of school of 2022, I personally was here till I think 1 o'clock in the morning. I went home, I slept, I took a shower, and I would think I was back by 4 o'clock in the morning that day, because we were trying to find buses and drivers and still routing I think, 4 or 5,000 students. Fast forward to this year, I went home at a decent hour. I got a good night's sleep and came in the next morning. And quite frankly, my phone did not ring once with a transportation issue that morning. And so kudos to the transportation team for not only routing students, but the communication that went out, and the communication team, thank you for that. And really our partnership with Metro and our vendors, really, we took a lot of time to make sure that that was cemented in place. I'm not saying that we were perfect this year, we still have a lot of growth to do, but where we were 3 years ago to where we are today, I think is a 180-degree difference.
And I know you've been here several years, but I will testify that over a decade, this is very good. Over a decade or a dozen years, this is remarkable. And, you know, success has many fathers. And we know that many people have chimed in to take some credit. And we know where the credit is actually to go, and we appreciate it. This is pretty remarkable. I think we're there.
Final thoughts?
Oh, Kevin.
Sorry,
Kevin's on.
That's okay.
just one thing, not to be.
Uh-oh.
But a scheduling thing, well, a scheduling thing. So the forecast, they're calling it a budget and 3-year forecast instead of a 4, or, you know, that's how they get the 3. It's really a
Sure.
4, but whatever. But it is due on October the 15th. So the board meets on October the 12th. Perfect. But the last finance committee before that will be September 19th. So we can have a high-level discussion maybe September 19th.
You put it on the agenda.
But then we wouldn't have time to do a last minute before the board. So I just kind of want to throw that out.
Oh, no, I'm glad you did. So is the thought, the high level and then a memo to finance? Would that be okay with you?
That's fine with me.
That would be, because we
Thank
do
you.
like to give you,
No, we do, and
get
we
that
want you
last
to,
event.
because people,
Yeah.
before the board sees it, they'll look and say, did you guys see that? Yeah. Okay,
Perfect. Thank
that's
you.
great, thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right. All right, we have our last comments from our treasurer here.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. And I'm going to read it so I hopefully won't cry.
Good.
As I conclude my 10 years of service as Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to the members of the Finance Committee. Okay, here I go. All right.
That's okay.
It's been an honor to work alongside you and stewarding the resources of Cincinnati Public Schools with integrity, transparency, and care. Together, we've navigated both challenges and opportunities with a shared commitment to fiscal responsibility and educational excellence. Your support, your questions, your insights, even your challenges, and your unwavering focus on what's best for our students and community have helped guide and strengthen the district's financial foundation. As I step away from my role, I leave you with 5 parting thoughts to help guide the important work ahead. First, continue expanding the return on investment efforts. With shrinking revenues, it's more critical than ever that each investment is measured by its impact on student outcomes. 2, support Treasurer Wagner.
It does go, don't worry,
It's
we'll be
hard to
saying that
change,
for a
right?
little while.
Treasurer Guston and upholding strong financial accountability. Clear and responsible stewardship remains the cornerstone of public trust. Third, develop a comprehensive tax policy for future planning. A proactive framework will provide stability and foresight in navigating the district's long-term needs. I'm sharing a recommended strategy for developing this policy, which I've passed around. Mike and I were working with David Conley. He's
Okay.
doing this across the state with a bunch of districts. So it's kind of a proposed way to make that happen. And I'll have to pass that baton on to Treasurer Guston. Fourth, continue to the laser-like focus on data integrity and transparency throughout CPS. All data drives our business processes, from student data, financial data, employee data. And so just implore you to continue that focus on the integrity of that data. And finally, expand the budget process to consider all funds collectively to adopt a consolidated balanced budget. Please resist the temptation to use your cash reserve to balance the budget. It has been my privilege to serve alongside you for many years, holding the trust of this community with integrity, transparency, and care. I leave with a sense of pride in the work we've accomplished together and confidence in the continued stewardship of CPS's resources. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this journey. Though I may be stepping away from this role, I will always be cheering for Cincinnati Public Schools for their continued success. Thank you.
Thank you. See,
You know,
that's,
this is so hard because after 32 years, I mean, even this morning, I'm like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Like, I'm still going to be part of that conversation, but it's hard to step away. So, but thank you for your support.
thank you for your service.
Thanks, Trina.
That's right. Well, it's been a great meeting. It's actually kind of a bridge meeting in a way, and I appreciate the agenda that we've had and the conversations that we've had. I also appreciate the fact that, and this is something I was thinking while we were doing this, even like OSBA, when you talk to other board members, when they do their finance meetings, they do not have 12 people here. They don't. They have the treasurer and maybe somebody as a guest specialist in something. So I think that's to your credit, Jen, and I think that it's deeply appreciated by the board. So, good comments. I will entertain.
Motion to adjourn?
And I'll second.